Chapter 218. In the end, Erica and others sat down with Lu Yinghua. Afterward, after a series of conversations, Wu Ming filtered out the series of events just now. After Luo Hao entered the villa, she woke up Alice, who was sleeping. Because Luo Hao was the king, Alice supported her tired body to entertain the guest. Luo Hao, on the other hand, allowed Alice to face Luo Hao with the excuse that, since you are my friend's wife, then you are not guilty, and you don't have to dig out your eyes and ears. Alice, on the other hand, had evil intentions. In addition, the outside world had basically confirmed the relationship between Wu Ming and Alice. Therefore, Alice sat opposite Luo Hao as the hostess of the party. That was why Alice called Wu Ming dear when Wu Ming came back. Luo Hao came to find Wu Ming because Wu Ming had snatched the great sage, Heaven's equal's prey that she had to kill. What Luo Hao said about humiliating her several times was purely Luo Hao's imagination. To put it nicely, she was arrogant, and to put it bluntly, she was opinionated. Afterward, Wu Ming said to Lu Yinghua, Luo Hao is probably going to wake up soon. You should wait outside her door first. After all, if Luo Hao didn't see Lu Yinghua when she woke up, Lu Yinghua would inevitably suffer physical pain. After all, sect leader had a unique temperament. Yes, senpai, I will take my leave first. After asking which room his master was in, Lu Yinghua used his lightness skill and left the living room. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming looked at the women sitting aside. Okay, you can also move freely. The great sage's matter is completely dealt with. I believe Luo Hao, who was defeated by me, will not make trouble again. After all, she was inexplicably full of dignity. With Wu Ming's understanding of Luo Hao, since she was defeated, she would be obedient as the loser. It was not that Wu Ming knew Luo Hao well, but Luo Hao's character was too easy to guess. However, the women didn't move. Now that the great sage, Heaven's equal's steel, has been eliminated, isn't it time for the strongest steel? Alice asked. That's right. The reason why Wu Ming dealt with the great sage, Heaven's equal, was to prevent a calamity from arising from the battle between Luo Hao and the great sage, Heaven's equal. On the other hand, Wu Ming wanted the final king to appear. The god of steel was especially easy to summon, and Susanoo also said that he summoned the great sage equaling heaven to eliminate the snake and dragon to prevent the resurrection of the strongest god of steel, the last king, who was sleeping on the easternmost island. Now that Wu Ming had defeated the great sage, Heaven's equal, it was time for the strongest steel to show itself. Guinevere had wanted to confirm whether the great sage equaling heaven was the strongest steel, but now that the great sage equaling heaven was being attacked by Wu Ming, no one would think that the great sage equaling heaven was the strongest steel. Because that lord is invincible, even Vilo-sama is not his opponent. That was what Wu Ming said to Guinevere when she met Wu Ming in the woods. In short, the strongest steel, the last king, would not be defeated. That was what Guinevere would protect even at the cost of his life. In this regard, Wu Ming would not be arrogant enough to say that he could defeat the last king, but Wu Ming would not avoid the battle because of an unknown enemy. Wu Ming-sama, do you really want to liberate the last king? Alice asked solemnly. The other women who knew the inside story also looked at Wu Ming with a serious expression. Wu Ming only had one answer to that. Of course. Wu Ming's face showed an unruly smile. After all, even if I don't take the initiative to liberate the last king now, the last king will be liberated sooner or later. Wu Ming learned from Guinevere that as long as the number of demon kings on the ground increased, the last king would be awakened. Now, there were 7 godslayers on the ground, including Wu Ming. Because of Wu Ming's nature, the awakening of the last king was weakened, but as long as another human became a godslayer in the future, the last king would be awakened, which was irreversible. Wu Ming couldn't help but think of the boy he met when he first came to this world, Chao Hu-tang. Wu Ming had a feeling that if there was no Wu Ming at that time, that boy might have become the 7th king. Of course, Wu Ming believed that as long as he was given some opportunities, he would definitely become the 8th king. Wu-ming didn't have the habit of leaving a time bomb in his house. What Wu-ming had to do was to defuse the bomb at the smallest cost. Erica and the others looked at Wu-ming with a smile. This was one of the reasons why they followed this king. Alice sighed, and then, like Erica and the others, looked at Wu-ming with a smile. In that case, I won't stop you, but I have to remind you that the Black Prince Yarek has come to this easternmost island. The Black Prince? Wu-ming thought. When leaving the grove where Guinevere was, Wu-ming vaguely felt a magic power similar to that of the Godslayers, but because there was no need to come into contact with it, Wu-ming didn't care about it. He should have been attracted by the Holy Grail held by Guinevere. The Holy Grail of this world was the Holy Grail of King Arthur mythology, which was refined by Guinevere. The magic power it contained was comparable to that of multiple Godslayers, and it was specially used to provide magic power energy for the awakening of the last king. Wu-ming had read from the information provided by Erica that the Black Prince Yarek had originally sought the Holy Grail, which was held by Guinevere. It was because he refined the Holy Grail that Guinevere was demoted from Mother Earth to godly ancestor. As long as he doesn't provoke me, I won't care about him. Then, Wu-ming spoke again. Next, I will go to Secluded World. Secluded World. The girls were puzzled. I'm going to recover Japan and make it my own territory. Huh? Wanli Guyuli and Liliana were obviously shocked by Wu-ming's words. Hui Na of Qingqiu Courtyard said calmly. Erica frowned and asked after exchanging glances with Alice. Wu-ming, you want to take Japan as your own territory first, and then attack the last king? Erica was indeed worthy of being called Erica. She immediately understood Wu-ming's plan. That's right, Erica is the first to understand. I think Alice should have thought of it long ago. After speaking, Wu-ming looked at Alice, who had an "I knew it" expression on her face. Of course. Alice smiled slightly. First of all, Wu-ming, you haven't used your territory so far, and this easternmost island is suitable for you. Second, if you subdue the Japanese Magic Association, it will undoubtedly be of great help in the matter of the last king. It was like living in someone else's house was always better than living in one's own house. If one didn't have a house, one could buy someone else's house. After all, the king was very rich, powerful. In that case, how can't stay here any longer? Chapter 219. Everyone turned to look at the source of the voice. The tattered clothes on Luo Hao's body had long disappeared and were replaced by gorgeous clothes. Strangely, Lu Yinghua was not with Luo Hao. Since you are ready to conquer this easternmost land as your territory, I can't stay here for long. My friend Wu-ming, you have the strength to look down on me, the king of Wuxia, Luo Hao. I admit defeat. Besides, you already have a wife. Even if we have been honest with each other again, let's continue to be friends and confidants. Speaking of me, Luo Hao turned around and disappeared using God's feet, leaving behind Wu-ming and the others with a confused look. To be honest, Wu-ming didn't know when he and Luo Hao became friends. Thinking about it carefully, it should have started at Lushan Mountain. Was it because they were honest with each other and couldn't become each other's other half, so they became friends? Wu-ming expressed that he was depressed. Allah, it seems like Lord Leader really wants to be your husband and wife. How did you treat her? Alice looked at Wu-ming with a joyful expression. However, Wu-ming always felt that there was a trace of jealousy in Alice's words. After all, they were also a pair recognized by the outside world. Even if she didn't feel anything at the beginning, now Alice naturally had some feelings for Wu-ming. Who cares about her? Who doesn't know that there is no normal Godslayer? Wu-ming waved his hand helplessly. Thinking about it, Salvatore, Warban, and Luo Hao, which one of them was not a problem child? Madame Aisha had a physique that unconsciously involved her surroundings, but she could always turn danger into safety. The only one who could be regarded as righteous was the American Godslayer, John Pluto Smith. But it was said that he was also full of chunibu. Otherwise, he wouldn't wear a motorcycle helmet like a superhero and wear a thick coat to protect the American people. The Black Prince Yarek was the only king who claimed to be different from other godslayers. Yarek did not like to face his enemies head-on. He usually used tricks to deal with his enemies. That was why Alice was able to compete with Yarek despite the well-known conclusion that humans could not defeat the God-slayers. However, even though Yarek said so, Wuming knew that Yarek was also eager to fight. This was what it meant to be a God-slayer. Then, I'll go find some trouble. I'll be right back. After saying that, Wuming disappeared from the hall. Hidden world. After all, he had been here before. Wuming naturally knew the method to head to the secluded world. After arriving at secluded world, Wuming immediately moved to a small wooden hut. Without any nonsense, Wuming pushed the door open and entered. This time, there was no old monk and Princess Glass Eyes in the room. There was only Susanoo, who was drinking alone and having fun. I won't say much. Give me the history editing committee, and I will destroy the last king. Wu Ming sat across from Susanoo and looked at him as he continued to speak. Your goal is not to revive the last king and let him sleep. My goal is to let him sleep forever. There is no conflict. After drinking a mouthful of wine, Susanoo laughed. Should I say that you are arrogant, or should I say that you are fearless? If you haven't seen the last king, you won't believe it. You can't defeat him. It could only be said that Susanoo's character was in line with the character in the myths. Are you trying to say that you are afraid? Wuming asked. Afraid? Ha 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 ha, when have I ever been afraid? I'm just reminding you. Susanoo took another sip of wine and looked at Wuming. It's not impossible to give you the history editing committee, but Susanoo's magic began to condense. This is the result of my many years of hard work. It's too easy to give it to you. Boom! Tyrannical magic broke out from the cabin and completely destroyed the cabin. Wu Ming flew out from the explosion of the cabin and gently landed on the ground. Looking at the fully armed Susanoo in front of him, Wu Ming couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth. This is also what I want. Then you can try my new ability. I am the strongest and I hold all the victory in my hands. Be it human or demon, I am a person who can defeat all enemies, and I will defeat any enemy that stands in my way. Giants with unparalleled divine power, please give me your aid. Fear the one with wings. Evil people and powerful people are all afraid of me who have wings. My wings will bring you curses. Evil people can't hit me. In an instant, the long and short hands pointed to 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock respectively. The giant stone plate and the phoenix stone plate lit up. Feeling the threat from Wuming, Susanoo gathered a strong storm around him. It's not over yet, Wuming shouted. I will deny the sky, deny the earth, the storm will destroy everything, and the rain will cover everything. With this supreme divine power, I will make everything in heaven and earth bow down. You have violated the contract and brought sin to the world. On Lord's Day, sinners will be punished. Crush their backs, dig out their bones, hair and brains, and trample on their blood and mud. If I am the one who cannot be approached by darkness, I will follow the words of the Lord and destroy you. In an instant, the hands in Wuming's heart turned and pointed to the 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock. However, the two stone plates in the 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock continued to light up and didn't go out. At this moment, Wuming activated 4 avatars. The dark red shadow of a small giant wrapped around Wuming's body. Wuming, who entered the state of lightning speed, instantly moved in front of Susanoo. Try this move of mine, Susanoo shouted. The storm gathered around him instantly burst toward Wuming. The storm comparable to a super typhoon instantly struck in front of Wuming. If Salvatore, who was blessed with the defense authority, was hit by this blow, he would probably be disabled. But, The storm in the opposite direction of this storm was released by Wu Ming. The storm was offset when the forward rotation met the reverse rotation. All the evildoers, be afraid of my power. Now I will get the majesty of 10 mountains, the power of 100 rivers, and the strength of 1,000 giant dragons. The majestic me will raise the mark of a fierce dragon. Lightning, lightning, lightning. I am the conqueror who can defeat thousands with white, thousands with thousands, and tens of thousands with tens of thousands. Now, please shine brightly for me, who is standing on the side of justice, and give me divine power. 2 more power stone plates lit up. At this moment, half of the small stone plate in Wu Ming's heart lit up. The giant phantom turned into a giant dragon phantom with countless thunder and lightning entwined on it. Then, the dragon claw full of annihilation, accompanied by countless thunder and storm, attacked Susanoo. Boom! Chapter 220. Wu Ming left secluded world, leaving behind Susanoo, who was in a mess. The result was obvious. Susanoo's life was easily lost. After all, Wu Ming had activated his 6th incarnation. Wu Ming didn't kill him. Although his character was quite bad, Susanoo still indirectly helped Wu Ming. If it weren't for him, Hui Na wouldn't come to Wu Ming's side, and Wu Ming wouldn't go to Yushi, and he wouldn't know about the last king. Secondly, his purpose was to prevent the resurrection of the last king. No matter what the reason was, the result was always good. Therefore, Wu Ming spared Susanoo's life. Regarding the problem of multiple incarnations, Wu Ming recently discovered that as long as a large amount of magical power was stored in the stone plate, even if the pointer was cancelled, the incarnations wouldn't fail. As a result, Wu Ming developed a true overlapping of incarnations, unlike the double incarnations in the long and short pointer state. That was the complete control without side effect. Noble Phantasm, 12 incarnations, God's Killer. Each incarnation was comparable to a Noble Phantasm, and Noble Phantasm was the key to turning defeat into victory. Wu Ming, who activated 6 Noble Phantasms, was too much of a bug. Even Susanoo's life couldn't withstand it. Annihilation broke all of Susanoo's defenses. Titan provided power, so that every blow could hurt Susanoo's life. Thunder God and Storm provided restraining effect. Too much wind and lightning would break steel. Phoenix provided speed, so that Susanoo couldn't escape, and Dragon Seed provided mutual restraint. Without Dragon Snake, Steel Hero was useless. Steel Hero obtained the weapon to defeat Dragon Snake from Mother Earth Dragon Snake, which also meant that Dragon Snake could devour steel. Combined with the above, Wu Ming easily subdued Susanoo's life. After all, the god of disobedience was just a god's incarnation, and its ability was naturally inferior to a real god. It could only be said that the power of Noble Phantasm was too powerful, and the power it exerted was comparable to the power of a real god, which Wu Ming experienced in Uruk. Then, after defeating Susanoo's life, Wu Ming left after Susanoo said, "It seems that I have to live in seclusion." Although Susanoo would use some tricks and the like, Wu Ming didn't care. After all, his strength was here. Who would be afraid of a trick? After leaving Yushi, he contacted Sebastian, who was sent by Wu Ming to meet Satya. "How is it, Sebastian? Did you successfully meet Satya?" "I'm really sorry, Lord Wu Ming. Satya seems to have been targeted by America's Godslayer. The other party's power is a little difficult to deal with, so Satya hasn't met up with me for the time being." Sebastian's old but strong voice sounded. "America's Godslayer? That should be John Pluto Smith. He's a complete chunibu. I reckon that Satya's cruel methods attracted him," Wu Ming said. "Forget it. There's no rush now. Help Satya escape from the Godslayer first. Bring Dragon Snake over when it's safe." "Yes, Lord Wu Ming." Then, Wu Ming cut off the communication. John Pluto Smith? It's unfortunate that Zaisha ran into this superhero. After all, he was an existence that took it as his duty to fight criminals and evil. At this moment, a black wind blew, and an owl flew over and landed on Wu Ming's shoulder. My compatriot, I've already unlocked the seal on Gorgon's stone. I have to say that you do have unique insights in this area. Even I, the goddess of wisdom, am impressed by this sealing technique. Wu Ming said as he walked slowly. You're flattering me. I'm just using the knowledge that Master taught me. After all, this was also the strength of the dragon of Origin's body. I've prepared a battle stage for you and me. Tonight at midnight, I'll be waiting for you at the Invisible Island in the Pacific Ocean. With that, the owl flew away. Invisible Island. Wu Ming stopped and pondered. The Invisible Island was where the 3 Gorgon sisters lived. Legend had it that it was filled with stone statues of various people. They had overestimated themselves and came to crusade against Medusa, but they were petrified by Medusa. Logically speaking, the Invisible Island should no longer exist. However, since Athena said so, it meant that she had summoned the place where the 3 Gorgon sisters lived. As expected of the goddess of Medusa, Athena and Medea. The Invisible Island. With that, Wu Ming walked toward the villa. Just as he approached the villa, Wu Ming discovered a large hole in the wall of the villa. Attack! Wu Ming shook his head and denied this possibility. Then, Wu Ming walked into the villa and saw Erica drinking afternoon tea. Where are the others? Also, Erica, what's with the hole in the villa? Wu Ming asked curiously. Her Highness Alice went back to her room to rest due to her exhaustion. Yuli went home to take care of her sister. Lily sent her off. As for Hui Na from the clear autumn courtyard, she should be cultivating now. Then, Erica took a sip of tea. As for the hole, it wasn't your good friend's doing. Luo Hao? After Erica's explanation, Wu Ming learned the origin of the hole. When Luo Hao woke up and found herself lying in bed, she could not help but feel annoyed that she had lost to Wu Ming. Then, she changed her clothes and opened the door. Lu Yinghua was kneeling on the ground, waiting for Luo Hao to wake up. Then, for some unknown reason, Luo Hao gave Lu Yinghua a palm strike, and a large hole appeared in the villa. According to Erica, it might have been because she was unhappy. Wu Ming blushed with shame. So, you're just sitting here doing nothing. Wu Ming sat on the sofa and commented on Erica. What do you mean by doing nothing? Afternoon tea is also a compulsory course. Then, Erica looked at Wu Ming, who was unscathed but slightly dirty, and asked, Did you have a fight with Susanu's man? Yeah, that's right. We had a fight. Wu Ming casually picked up a piece of pastry and stuffed it into his mouth. If I'm not mistaken, the History Redaction Committee should have been subdued by Sayako Miyazaki. So easy. Erica was in disbelief. After all, the History Redaction Committee was the official magic association of Japan. How could it be subdued so easily, even if the other party was a god slayer? After all, the History Redaction Committee has always been controlled by Susanu's man. Now that I defeated Susanu's man and he's officially going into seclusion, the higher-ups of the History Redaction Committee can't wait to find a backer. Wu Ming leaned on the sofa and said casually. Erica shrugged uninterestedly. I thought I would be able to F***ck some disobedient magician. It's a good chance to exercise my body. Erica stretched and her body was exposed. Wu Ming glanced casually, then turned his head and said, By the way, is your relationship with Qingqiu Courtyard's Hui Na still not good? Chapter 221. Wu Ming was a little concerned. After all, when Erica mentioned names, only Hui Na of the Clear Autumn Courtyard called her by her surname, while the others called her by her first name. You can't say that we're not on good terms. It's her fault for always wanting to defeat me, the first wife, to obtain the position of first wife. Her Highness Alice is clearly the first wife. Erica waved her hand helplessly. Back then, when Hui Na of the Clear Autumn Courtyard first came to Wu Ming's side as an attendant, she immediately challenged Erica to a duel in order to be the first wife. Although Wu Ming, Erica, and the others denied the so-called first wife, whenever something happened, as long as Wu Ming was not around, the girls would follow Erica's lead. This inevitably made Hui Na of the Clear Autumn Courtyard and Erica somewhat hostile. It was not until Alice came to Japan that Hui Na of the Clear Autumn Courtyard slowed down her attacks on Erica. Now that he thought about it, it seemed that Alice was the real first wife. What's going on? Wu Ming raised an eyebrow. Forget it. After all, with Her Highness Alice, our relationship has improved quite a bit. Let Her Highness Alice help us with the title of first wife. Erica smiled slyly. If Alice were here, she would definitely accept it. Not only because of the relationship between Wu Ming and Alice, but also because of Alice's bad taste. Wu Ming believed that she would accept it. Forget it. I have something to tell you. Wu Ming shook his head and stopped thinking about those messy things. His expression became serious. I've returned the Gorgon stone to Athena. She and I have a duel on the invisible island in the Pacific Ocean tonight. Pfft, Erica, who was drinking black tea, could not help but spit it out. What did you say? Erica looked at Wu Ming rather helplessly. I knew that God's layers are troublesome existences. Erica sighed. Wu Ming felt a little embarrassed. After all, he had secretly given the item that caused the starless night, which caused the end of the world, to the enemy. Although Wu Ming and Athena were both friends and foes, it was true. Well, don't say that. Athena's existence is also a problem, so I'm prepared to defeat her in one go. After all, Athena was the goddess of wisdom. Her most terrifying thing was not her power, but her wisdom. I'm guessing that you won't kill Athena. Erica looked at Wu Ming suspiciously. How's that? This made Erica feel a little awkward. After all, Wu Ming and Athena made a bet that the loser would become the subordinate god of the winner because he didn't want to kill Athena. If Silent Wonder won, not only would they be able to restrict Athena, but they would also be able to draw Athena's strength to their side. Why not? After all, you're especially gentle to women, my Lord Wang. But even so, Erica didn't object. After all, logically speaking, Wu Ming wasn't the kind of person who would lay his hands on someone he had a good relationship with. Do you still need to tell the others? Erica asked. Forget about that. Thinking of Liliana's righteous teachings and Wanli Guyuli's furious teachings, Wu Ming felt that it was better not to tell them. I feel like you're a heartless man who cheats on his wife and has a mistress, Erica teased. Whatever you say. Wu Ming had already given up. A moment later, Wu Ming left. In the villa, Wu Ming told Erica to say that he had not returned from the hidden world to cover it up. Using magic power to fly, Wu Ming arrived at a certain part of the Pacific Ocean. The magic power here was especially abundant, and it was filled with a dark aura. As he flew down, a small island appeared before Wu Ming's eyes. The sky, which had not yet darkened, was now completely dark due to some unknown factor. Wu Ming landed on the island and looked around at this terrifying island. The island was filled with stone statues. They were the legendary heroes who had been petrified by Medusa's petrifying demon eye. Each stone statue was different in shape, but they had one thing in common, which was that the stone statues' faces were filled with fear. If a person with a weak state of mind were to come here, it was very likely that they would be affected by the aura emitted by these stone statues filled with terror. You really have a bad taste, Athena, Wu Ming said to the surroundings. They only have themselves to blame. A beautiful female voice similar to Athena's sounded. Black fog appeared in front of Wu Ming, and a beautiful girl walked out of it. The girl had waist-length hair and wore a straw hoop on her head. She wore a Greek-style white off-the-shoulder dress. Her golden snake eyes were dazzling, and her beautiful face was unknowingly mesmerizing. In addition to that, a terrifying and powerful aura came from the girl. That aura was far more threatening than Susanu's. Even Wu Ming didn't have such a terrifying aura. Obviously, that was Athena, the goddess of the earth, who had restored her Trinity true form. Is this your original appearance? That lowly is more interesting. Wu Ming touched his chin and carefully looked at Athena. Oh, you really dare to say that, Villo there answered. For the sake of being a snake, if you take the initiative to surrender, I can let you become my companion instead of a lowly subordinate god. As she spoke, Athena's aura was instantly released, and the monstrous aura of a queen gushed out. You're no longer the three-eyed lowly you used to be. Although you're quite interesting in your current queen form, I still prefer the three-eyed lowly you. Wu Ming didn't answer Athena's question. Instead, he commented on her. Athena's snake-like eyes glowed brightly. It seems that you refuse. Isn't it obvious? Furthermore, I am an existence that once sat on the throne. Surrendering without a fight is not in line with my character. As he spoke, Wu Ming bared his teeth and revealed an unruly smile. Originally, as a non-human, Wu Ming had some of the instincts of a beast. Now that Wu Ming had the physique of a god-slayer, those instincts were even more obvious. God-slayers were a group of warlike existences, and they could become stronger as long as they fought. They would adapt to their abilities in battle, and in the end, their authority would become like the instincts of wild beasts, able to do as they pleased. Then, let's fulfill the agreement of that day. The loser will listen to the winner's arrangement. Athena took out a large dragon snake scythe from the black mist behind her. That's what I wanted. Wu Ming also took out a gun from the golden ripples. After that, Athena and Wu Ming moved at the same time. The black sickle, which represented death, and the white holy spear, which represented life, clashed for the first and last time. Chapter 222. In the Pacific Ocean, the terrifying island that had just appeared recently, death and life were fighting against each other. Whoosh! Athena, who was holding a scythe, swung it fiercely toward Wu Ming, and several black blades of death shot toward Wu Ming. Bang! 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 Silent, who was holding the spear of the world tree, Yggdrasil, used the tip of the spear, which was filled with life elements, to deflect the black blades. Then, Wu Ming held Yggdrasil in a reverse grip and placed it on his shoulder. Yggdrasil! With the incomplete release of the noble phantasm, the white holy spear turned into a green beam of light full of life and burst toward Athena. Athena waved her hand, and a few ferocious-looking giant rock snakes rose from the ground and blocked Athena's path. Hiss, hiss, hiss! Several giant snakes roared and rushed toward the green light beams. Bang! 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 After breaking through several giant snakes, the energy of the noble phantasm weakened, and it was bitten by a giant snake behind a large number of stones. After all, it was an incomplete noble phantasm. It was used by Wu Ming to test the waters. Even if it was broken, Wu Ming was not annoyed. Wu Ming waved his hand, and Yggdrasil, which was bitten by the giant snake, began to vibrate violently in the snake's mouth. Bang! The sound of glass breaking came from the giant snake's mouth, and its head exploded. Yggdrasil returned to Wu Ming's hand and was firmly grasped by Wu Ming. At this time, the sound of something breaking through the air came. Whoosh! Wu Ming hurriedly dodged a sharp arrow. Wu Ming looked at the source of the arrow. Athena was holding a quaint oak bough in her hand, aiming at Wu Ming. As he pulled the string, 2 arrows appeared on the oak bough. Whoosh! 2 more arrows flew toward Wu Ming. Wu Ming raised his hand, and Yggdrasil bounced the 2 arrows away. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming jumped up in an instant, and a huge snake appeared in Wu Ming's position. Then, the giant snake, which was a few times larger than the others, rushed toward Wu Ming. Noble and powerful, wise and kind, I will become a miracle and lead the world to the dawn. Wu Ming's stone plate lit up, and the long pointer pointed at 12 o'clock, and the invisible magic flame attached to Wu Ming's body. Heaven fire! The holy white flame turned in a spiral shape and shot toward the giant rock snake. Whoosh! Like gasoline being ignited by flames, the giant rock snake was instantly infected by the white flames and burned. Hiss! Then, the giant rock snake screamed as it was burned to ashes by the flames. At this time, Wuming turned around. Clang! Wuming's white holy lance Yggdrasil collided with the black dragon snake's scythe, and sparks splashed. It was Athena, who wanted to sneak attack Wuming but was discovered. As expected of the goddess of wisdom and war. She's really something. Wuming smiled happily. It's just a small trick in front of you. Sure enough, I like you more and more. Right now, her intention was to have Wuming submit to Athena, full of the aura of a queen. I don't have the habit of being under others. You'd better be obedient and be my subordinate god. Wu Ming and Athena suddenly exerted their strength and collided with each other. Wu Ming stretched out his hand and countless golden ripples appeared, and golden chains burst out from it. The target was Athena. Athena hurriedly retreated, and Enkidu hurriedly wrapped around Athena. Athena, who was in the air, constantly dodged and avoided the golden chains. While Athena was still dodging the chains, Wuming returned Enkidu to Enkidu. Wuming raised his spear and attacked. Countless green energy emerged from Yggdrasil and formed green vines. Together with Wuming's hand, the vines wrapped around Yggdrasil, and a huge green vine spear wrapped around Wuming's hand appeared. Athena was indeed the goddess of wisdom. She was very relaxed when dodging Enkidu's attack. Athena looked at Wuming and stared at Wuming. Then, Athena's golden snake eyes turned gray and emitted a terrifying magic power. Wuming could clearly feel that his speed had slowed down, and his legs were gradually losing feeling. Then, Athena looked at him again. Glancing at his petrified feet, Wuming instantly released his magic power, and the petrified parts on Wuming's body began to fall off. The grayish-black snake eyes scanned Enkidu. Enkidu, who was in charge of Enkidu, instantly sensed the abnormality of Enkidu. Lord Wuming, the opponent is using the demon eye of petrification, Enkidu said to Wuming. Wuming understood, and Enkidu entered the golden ripples and was put away by Wuming. Then, Wuming chanted a new language. Lightning! 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 I am the conqueror who can defeat 1,000 with white, 10,000 with 1,000, and 10,000 with 10,000. Now, for me, who is on the side of justice, please shine brightly and bestow me with divine power. I am the one who will crush all enemies and enmity between humans and demons. Fear the one with wings. Evil people and powerful people are all afraid of me with wings. My wings will bring you curses. Evil people will not be able to hit me. The long and short needles pointed at the 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock respectively, and the Thunder God and Phoenix avatars activated one after another. Wuming, who had turned into an invisible lightning bolt, was not affected by Athena's demon eye of petrification. Wuming was so fast that Athena did not even have time to react, and he instantly appeared beside her. Wuming turned into a human and stabbed at Athena. As if hit by a meteorite, Athena fell heavily to the ground, stirring up a large amount of dust. As the dust settled, Wuming, who was holding a huge vine spear, looked at the large crater that was gradually healing after being destroyed. Your island is quite sturdy. It can even heal itself, Wuming said in surprise. It's useless. As long as this invisible island is not completely destroyed, it can automatically heal itself. Just like me, the mother goddess of the underworld and death, I have an incomparably strong regenerative ability and vitality. Even if I am injured, I can quickly recover. Athena looked at Wuming with a teasing smile. Is that so? Wuming's lips curled up as he continued. Then, I will destroy you along with this island. He cancelled the Thunder God and Phoenix avatars, and the long and short needles pointed at the 11 o'clock direction. For victory, come to me quickly. Undying sun, please bestow upon me a shining steed. Horses with enough intelligence, bring me the light wheel that symbolizes your master. Nay! Chapter 223. Accompanied by a loud neigh, the sky that was originally dark and without a trace of light suddenly cleared up. A beautiful white horse, accompanied by a huge sun, descended from the sky. Nay! My old enemy, the white horse of the sun. Athena frowned as she looked at the fireball that was comparable to a real sun with a sour expression. Wooming held Yggdrasil with one arm raised high and the other arm holding the giant Yggdrasil, then looked at Athena. So, can you withstand my double incarnation of the sun, Athena? As he spoke, Wu Ming's raised hand abruptly fell down. Nay! The white steed charged down without any fancy decorations. Athena looked at Wu Ming, who was standing motionless in the distance. She gave up on attacking and condensed her mana into a shield. The Aegis Shield, Wu Ming read out the name of the shield. Legend has it that the Aegis Shield was made by Hephaestus, the god of fire in Greek mythology. One was held by Zeus and the other was held by Athena. The one held by Zeus was called Aegis. The Aegis Shield had the ability to generate storms. When it was placed in the sky would become dark, and when it was picked up, the sky would become clear again. It was said that this shield had a super high level of defense that even Zeus' powerful weapon couldn't damage. The Aegis shield held by Athena was called Aegis because the shield was inlaid with Medusa's head. Legend has it that Perseus, with the help of Athena and Hermes, killed Medusa. After that, Perseus cut off Medusa's head. Although Medusa was dead, the power of petrification in her eye of petrification did not disappear. After knowing that, Perseus offered Medusa's head to Athena, and then Athena inlaid Medusa's head on her shield. That was the origin of Aegis' shield. Athena's shield was different from Zeus' shield. Athena's shield only had the defense of Zeus' shield, but it did not have the ability to summon storms. However, because it was embedded with the Medusa's head, when the Medusa's head opened its eyes, it became a magic shield that would petrify anyone it faced. Meanwhile, all the weapons and items that the god of disobedience used were god relics that the god of disobedience had imitated. To put it simply, they were not real weapons, armor, and items that were mentioned in myth. Instead, they were made of magic, which was very similar to a servant. Even so, it was still a clone of the god of disobedience's artifact, so it shouldn't be underestimated. After all, it still had some of the original artifact's abilities. Just a little sun fall. Athena held the Aegis shield in both hands and welcomed the arrival of the incarnation of the sun. The eye of Medusa on the Aegis shield opened, and the gray light shone on the white horse. However, the white horse was still descending at its original speed. The incarnation of the sun was a new authority after the fusion of Waleslana's white horse and Mekir's god-king's divinity. Not only was it more powerful than the previous white horse, but it was also strengthened by authority and double incarnation. This authority could be said to be one of Wu Ming's trump cards. In order to deal with the immortal mother goddess, Wu Ming directly activated this incarnation. After all, it was Wu Ming's first time using this incarnation, so he might not be able to control it well. The main reason was that basically no one could force Wu Ming to use this trump card, so Wu Ming had never used it before. Now, in order to defeat Athena, Wu Ming chose to activate this incarnation. Fortunately, Athena chose to fight in the Pacific Ocean, so there was no need to worry about the ordinary people around her being affected. This was also one of the reasons why Wu Ming came without much preparation. Rumble! The white horse crashed into Athena, who was holding the Aegis shield, and the violent explosion directly covered the entire invisible island. At this moment, the entire invisible island was completely destroyed. Wu Ming floated in the sky, looking at the real sea of fire below. After all, the flames brought by the incarnation of the sun were inextinguishable, and would only be extinguished when Wu Ming's incarnation was extinguished. The sea was violently fluctuating because of the sun summoned by Wu Ming, and a large amount of white fog was constantly rising. After that, Wu Ming carefully searched. At this moment, Wu Ming suddenly discovered a petite lowly floating quietly above the sea of fire. The surrounding flames were scorching her, causing her to frown the entire time. In the competition between the sun and Mother Earth, Wu Ming's son won. In fact, Wu Ming didn't have any suspense about it. He couldn't imagine how powerful Wu Ming's incarnation could be. Perhaps the adult Wu Ming could handle it. After all, the growth of the root dragon's strength was not by leaps and bounds, but by a qualitative change. Of course, he would have to wait until he reached adulthood. Wu Ming shook his head, flew down, and hugged the unconscious and naked Athena, who was still floating on the sea. After that, he fished out the Gorgon's stone that was about to sink to the bottom of the sea. After all, the Gorgon's stone that had been unsealed could not be simply left around. It was a high-level god relic that represented the divinity of the Mother Goddess, and it might even attract disobedient gods. Looking at the naked Athena, Wu Ming looked away awkwardly. Wu Ming took out a piece of white cloth from the golden ripples of Draconis and put it on Athena. Because Athena had the Aegis shield, and Wu Ming deliberately reduced the lethality of the sun after breaking Athena's shield, Athena didn't die directly. However, even if she died, Athena still had the authority to resurrect. In fact, if Athena didn't take Wu Ming's son head-on, she wouldn't have failed here. After all, they were enemies, so naturally, she couldn't give in. In addition, Wu Ming did not continue to attack, so Athena chose to take it head-on. The goddess of wisdom should have chosen not to fight in the face of the situation just now, but in the end, she still lost to her own willfulness. Looking at the young Athena in his arms, Wu Ming smiled helplessly and shook his head. Because the sun's incarnation directly melted the invisible island, and they were at sea, Wu Ming didn't need to do any post-battle maintenance. With a simple wave of his hand, Wu Ming dispelled the undying flame and flew away with Athena, who was only draped in a white cloth. The sea level was still in a state of high temperature, constantly fluctuating. Chapter 224. Wu Ming returned to the outside of the villa. As soon as he landed, Wu Ming noticed several cold gazes. When he turned around, Erica, Liliana, Qingqiu Courtyard Hui Na, Wanli Guyuli, and Alice were all looking at Wu Ming. However, Erica and Alice's gazes were filled with joy, Qingqiu Courtyard Hui Na's gaze was somewhat worried, and Wanli Guyuli and Liliana's gazes were filled with anger. I heard that Lord Wu Ming returned the Gorgon stone to Lady Athena. Wanli Guyuli's face was gloomy. He also very kindly helped Lady Athena recover her strength. Liliana frowned. And Lord Wu Ming and Lady Athena made a bet, Wanli Guyuli continued with a gloomy face. And it's a bet where the loser will be the winner's subordinate god. Liliana was still frowning. Lord Wu Ming, do you know that this is an extremely dangerous bet? Looking up, Wanli Guyuli looked at Wu Ming. It's fine if it's Erica, but you didn't even bring me your knight. Liliana looked at Wu Ming with dissatisfaction. Wanli Guyuli and Liliana stared at Wu Ming. However, as if he was already used to it, Wu Ming walked straight to the villa. Then Wu Ming said, "Let's go in first. It's cold outside." Everyone sat on the sofa. Then, Wu Ming arranged for Athena to stay in an empty room and walked out. Sitting on the sofa, Wu Ming looked at the girls. "By the way, how did you know?" Wu Ming glanced at Erica, wondering if she was the one who revealed the news. Erica smiled slyly. "It just spread around the world that the Eastern Hemisphere entered a polar day in a few minutes," Wanli Guyuli said. "We quickly gathered because we were worried that something might happen, but Erica claimed that it was your doing," Hui Na of the Blue Autumn Yard said. "Come to think of it, Welslana has the power to summon the sun. Plus, you have disappeared. No matter how you look at it, it has something to do with you." Alice smiled. "I can't hide it anymore. After all, it's already so obvious." Erica pretended to wave her hand helplessly. Only then did Wu Ming realize that he had indeed gone a little overboard just now. Wu Ming was probably affected by the Godslayer's constitution. He would sometimes forget some things when he was fighting. At that time, Wu Ming only wanted to get rid of Athena in one breath, so he released the incarnation of the sun. Now the official history committee is busy trying to eliminate the panic of the people. And as a knight, I can't even serve my master when he's fighting. What a failure, Liliana said with some regret. Don't force yourself, Lily. The battle between Wu Ming and Athena, who has recovered the true form of Mother Earth, isn't something we can participate in. For example, if we were present when Wu Ming summoned the sun just now, we would definitely drag Wu Ming down. Also, you have to have confidence in your master, Lily. Alice said leisurely. This was also why Erica neither objected to Wu Ming going to the invisible island alone, nor did she blame Wu Ming for challenging Athena without permission. Liliana nodded slightly. Of course, Liliana was aware of this. However, her pride as a knight wouldn't allow her to watch her master go to the battlefield alone. Let's not talk about this for now. That was Lady Athena just now, right? Is it really okay for Lord Wu Ming to bring Lady Athena back? That's Lady Athena of Mother Earth. Wanli Guyuli looked at Wu Ming with some disappointment and scolded him fiercely. Don't worry, Yuli. The gods naturally abide by the rules. Since Athena was defeated by me, she definitely won't mess around, Wu Ming explained. Wu Ming thought of something and then said with a smile. And your attitude now is very impolite. Wanli Guyuli was shocked and quickly apologized. Please punish only me, your majesty. Don't implicate others. Looking at Wanli Guyuli, who instantly sat down, Wu Ming laughed. Ha 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 ha. Wanli Guyuli looked at Wu Ming in confusion. Erica couldn't stand it anymore and helped Wanli Guyuli up. Get up, Yuli. Wu Ming is joking with you. Really, after being together for so long, you still don't understand his character. Well, Lord Wu Ming sometimes has a bad taste. Alice nodded and agreed. Don't you think about yourself first when talking about others' bad taste, Alice? Wu Ming stopped laughing and looked at Alice with a, you still have the nerve to talk about others, look. Thank you for the compliment, Lord Wu Ming. Alice looked into Wu Ming's eyes and nodded with a smile. Well, everyone go to sleep. Although a lot of things have happened just now, it's over. Wu Ming clapped his hands and said. All the girls nodded and then returned to their rooms. It was just a pity that the official history committee was still cleaning up the mess caused by Wu Ming. After all, it was caused by their new king. Even if they didn't sleep, they had to deal with it. Then, Wu Ming came to Athena's room. You should be awake, Athena. Wu Ming sat on Athena's bed and looked at the sleeping lowly in front of him. The petite Athena's eyes flew open, and she sat up. I was afraid that I would disturb you flirting with your girls, so I continued to pretend to be asleep. Hearing this voice and looking at the unconscious Athena, Wu Ming smiled and touched Athena's head. Then I must thank you, my subordinate god. Hey! Athena was quite unhappy, but because of the bet, she didn't resist Wu Ming's touch. Have you really decided to release the last king? Athena's snake eyes stared straight at Wu Ming. Wu Ming nodded solemnly. Now, you should know that I'm a god from another world. Athena nodded. I have my own purpose in coming to this world. Sir, your purpose has basically been achieved. Wu Ming's noble phantasm, the 12 incarnations, could be said to be extremely powerful. With the dependent incarnation, Wu Ming's second authority, Ling Zhuzi, was basically useless. Ling Zhuzi, throw out the spirit orb obtained from killing Neza, the god of steel. The spirit orb will transform into Neza and provide combat power for the tamed demon. Since I am indebted here and promised Alice to solve the problem of the last king, I will definitely solve it. Even if you die? Athena asked. Even if I die, I will not die. Wu Ming answered firmly. You really are a man with a divine artifact. Athena then lay down. I'm a little tired. As my main god, Shouldn't you hug me to sleep? Athena looked straight at Wuming. Really, so many requests. If I didn't know better, I would have thought that I was your subordinate god. However, Wuming lay down obediently and hugged Athena. Athena leaned into Wuming's arms and rubbed against him. Just be a pillow. With this thought, Wuming and Athena fell asleep together. Chapter 225. At night, somewhere in Japan, Guinevere sat in the arms of Lancelot, who was riding a white horse. He held the arrowhead disc and closed his eyes. Faint magic particles floated around Guinevere. It could be seen that Guinevere was performing a magic trick. As if he had found something, Guinevere opened his eyes. However, the magical thing was that there was a universe in Guinevere's eyes. It was a planet in the universe, Earth. In Earth's orbit, right above Japan, a platform full of magic floated and rotated with Earth. Found it! Guinevere's voice was a little excited. It seems that even if you are demoted to a god ancestor, your astral vision is still powerful, Lancelot commented. Guinevere shook his head excitedly. If it weren't for the fight between Lord Wuming and Lord Athena, the strongest steel wouldn't have awakened, and I wouldn't have been able to find the last king. After all, this was also one of Wuming's ideas. In Japan, the reason why Susanoo and a group of people from the hidden world lured the great sage, Heaven's equal here, was to eliminate the dragon and destroy the snake. This was to prevent the dragon and snake attributes from attracting the last king and breaking the seal of the last king. If it were 200 or 300 years ago, they wouldn't have to be so careful. However, they couldn't do it now. As long as there was another demon king, God Slayer, on the ground, the seal of the last king would weaken. Now that there were 7 God Slayers, the seal of the last king could be said to be very loose. If it weren't for the fact that Wuming became a God Slayer as the god of disobedience, the last king would have awakened long ago. As Wuming said before, if there was another God Slayer now, the last king would definitely awaken. What Wuming, Guinevere, and Lancelot had discussed in the grove was Wuming's plan. They wanted to use the dragon and snake attributes to stimulate the last king's awakening and make him appear directly. However, the result was a failure. Wuming had long thought of this element of the dragon-snake attribute stimulation, so he had sent Zacia to America. However, plans could not keep up with changes. The battle between Wuming and Athena could also be considered as the stimulation of the dragon-snake attribute. After all, Athena was Mother Earth, and Wuming had the dual nature of steel and serpent. Especially during the battle with Athena, Wuming fully released the dragon-serpent attribute that he sealed after killing Neza. Wuming didn't think that 2 dragon serpents' aura and 1 Godslayer's aura couldn't awaken the last king. But in the end, the king did not appear. This was also the reason why Wuming used his trump card, the sun, right after the battle with Athena. He wanted to preserve his strength to deal with the last king, but the last king did not show up. As a last resort, Wuming contacted Guinevere and asked him to use spirit vision to find the place where the last king was sealed. Liliana, Wanli Yuri, and Alice, whose ancestors were god ancestors, all had extremely powerful spirit vision. Wu Ming didn't believe that Guinevere, a god ancestor who had fallen from Mother Earth, wouldn't have spirit vision. As a result, as Wuming expected, Guinevere really found the location of the last king. Although it's inappropriate to say this now, I still want to ask, have you really decided, my beloved daughter? Lancelot said in a puzzled tone. Guinevere fell into silence. Guinevere understood what Lancelot meant. Lancelot was asking if he was prepared for the master he served and his lover to kill each other. Whether it was the relationship between the hero and the demon king, the relationship between the strongest steel and the legendary dragon, or the relationship between different beliefs, Wuming and the last king were destined to not coexist peacefully. They must kill each other. This was something that Guinevere knew. Guinevere's eyes were full of confusion. Lancelot fell silent as well. There's an old Chinese saying that I think will suit you if I change it a little. Since ancient times, it's hard to have both loyalty and love. Perhaps it can be used on you now. Loyalty freed the last king and let him fight with the one he loved. There was a high possibility that the one he loved would be killed. Love gave up on freeing the last king and let the one he loved live in the world. After a long silence, Guinevere spoke. Then, if I choose love, uncle, will you kill me? Guinevere asked a question that sounded like a big joke. Lancelot was the shadow of God who protected Guinevere, the god ancestor. Guinevere actually asked his own guardian if he would kill him. Was this not a big joke? However, Lancelot's answer was, I will kill thee, Lancelot said calmly. I will kill thee who is not loyal to my master. Even if you are my beloved daughter, I will still kill thee. However, Guinevere accepted it calmly, as if he already knew the answer. Then, uncle, can you make a bet with Guinevere? Guinevere asked. Lancelot fell silent for a moment, then nodded his head that was wrapped in armor. Guinevere, who felt Lancelot's nod, smiled and continued. If the last king is defeated by the Villo, then you and I will pledge allegiance to the Villo and become the Villo's wife and knight. What do you think? To be honest, Lancelot was shaken. Having once followed Vero in this world, she knew that she once had the thought of, how great would it be if this person was my lord, but her loyalty to him did not waver. However, 1,000 years of longing could destroy a person, but it could also shake the heart of a disobedient god. I can't make the decision. I must ask my master. Lancelot's answer was neither yes nor no. However, Guinevere smiled. Of course we have to ask that lord first. Then, Guinevere began to unseal the last king. Guinevere left Lancelot's embrace, dismounted from his horse, and came to the ground. Then, he took out a golden cup from nowhere. This was the holy grail of King Arthur that the Black Prince, one of the Godslayers, and many other magicians were after. Guinevere placed the holy grail in front of him and knelt down with the arrowhead disc in his hand. Lancelot came to the side to protect Guinevere as well as to be on guard. Guinevere, the holy grail, and the arrowhead disc began to glow. The ritual to summon the last king had begun. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning shot towards Guinevere at a speed that shocked Lancelot. Uncle! Guinevere was shocked and shouted Lancelot's name. Just as the lightning was about to reach Guinevere, a spear stabbed at it. Chapter 226. The tip of the spear pierced the lightning. If it did not stop moving forward, the lightning would definitely be pierced by the tip of the spear. In an instant, the lightning made a sharp turn and deviated from Guinevere. Guinevere, who was somewhat worried, was relieved. Then, the lightning stopped not far from Guinevere and turned into a human figure. The figure was wearing a luxurious suit, a bow tie, and leather shoes. His black hair was parted in half, and it set off his handsome face. Lord Yarek, you are really haunting me. Although Guinevere used honorifics, there was a trace of anger in his tone. That's right, the noble man standing in front of Guinevere and Lancelot was the British Godslayer, Alexander Gerstein. His nickname was Black Prince Yarek, who was even more famous than himself. It's a pity. This is the best chance I've had in the past. I'm afraid I won't have another chance in the future. Yarek, who did not get what he wanted, was not upset. Instead, he calmly analyzed the situation. It's really hard on you, Lancelot. You have to protect such a useless guy, Yarek mocked. However, Lancelot did not accept Yarek's mockery. He was already holding a spear, fully armed and staring at Yarek. The atmosphere began to become tense. As old rivals who had been fighting for some time, Guinevere and Lancelot naturally knew what each other wanted. That was the Holy Grail placed in front of Guinevere, which had magic power comparable to that of multiple Godslayers. However, Guinevere would not hand over the Holy Grail no matter what. This was because the Holy Grail was an essential and important prop for the last king. The reason why Guinevere created the Holy Grail to store magic power was to replenish the magic power of the last king, who had exhausted his magic power because of his deep sleep. Just from this point alone, one could see the power of the last king. The amount of magic power required was comparable to the magic power of multiple Godslayers combined. Except for Wuming, among the 6 Godslayers, whether it was the oldest, Woban, or the youngest, Salvatore, they had never worried about the lack of magic power. No matter what kind of battle it was, no matter how exhausting it was, none of the 6 Godslayers except Wuming had ever said that they did not have enough mana. Based on this point alone, the last king's mana was comparable to the mana of multiple Godslayers combined. This showed how powerful the last king was. The reason why Wuming was excluded was because, like the last king, Wuming had more magic power than the last king. After all, it was a root dragon. How could it lack mana? Of course, it could not be said that Wuming's magic power was infinite. It was just that under the condition of a rather large base, the addition of the condition that his magic power recovery speed was not slow, which led to the continuous release of magic power. It would take months or years for Wuming to recover his magic power, and that was under the premise that Wuming did not automatically recover his magic power. Coupled with Wuming's constant meditation over the years, the upper limit of his demonic power had also broken through. This was also why Wuming dared to compete with the last king. Now this country is the territory of that lord. Aren't you afraid of offending that lord? Guinevere warned Yerek. You are talking about Villo Theransword, the guy who calls himself Wuming. He became a godslayer as a disobedient. Even if he is not as warlike and brutal as other people of his race, I can't agree with him. After all, he is a disobedient god with the authority of other disobedient gods. Yerek calmly stated his evaluation of Wuming. Guinevere frowned. After all, Yerek was the person he admired, so he naturally could not bear to hear others talk about him. Lancelot was also a little upset. He clenched his spear with one hand and pointed it at Yerek. If you still want to talk nonsense here, you'd better leave. I'm afraid I won't be able to control myself and kill you as the god of disobedience. After all, Lancelot was Guinevere's shadow of God. He could not leave Guinevere's vicinity. The only way was to appear as the god of disobedience. This would not only increase Lancelot's power, but also free him from the restriction of protecting Guinevere. This was why Lancelot said that if Guinevere chose to betray him, he would kill her. Looking at the furious Lancelot, Yerek smiled. Although that person is also King Arthur, you and the god ancestor behind you are not Guinevere and Lancelot. Why are you so agitated? Yerek mocked. A brilliant sword light shot toward Yerek. Yerek immediately dodged. Lancelot maintained his spear posture and looked at Yerek. I'll ask you again. Are you leaving or not? What if I insist on staying? Then I'll have to appear as the god of disobedience and kill you. Lancelot and Yerek stared at each other while Guinevere resumed the ritual of summoning the last king. We pray for the rebirth of the sword. Cut through the darkness of the apocalypse and kill the demon king of the apocalypse. The arrowhead disc in Guinevere's arms and the Holy Grail in front of him began to glow. The noble sword of swords, the blade of blades, the steel of steel. The arrowhead disc and the Holy Grail began to float into the sky at a speed that made Yerek frown. They turned into a meteor and flew into the universe. Thou art the blade that annihilates the demon king. Thou art the holy light that saves the world. Slay all Rakshasas. Be the call of our allies. Return to the world. After the chanting, the arrowhead disc and the Holy Grail arrived on a platform in the universe. There was a sword in the center of the platform. If Wuming was here, he would definitely recognize it. It was a knight's greatsword that was almost identical to Artoria's, King Arthur's, Excalibur in the lake, or even exactly the same. However, this holy sword looked extremely rusty, as if it could break at any moment. This was the sword of the legendary hero, the sword of salvation that killed the Demon King. The arrowhead disc and the Holy Grail floated above the sword of salvation. In an instant, the arrowhead disc and the Holy Grail melted and turned into liquid that flowed into the sword of salvation. Beep beep beep. The sword of salvation began to emit white lightning. Beep 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 beep. The lightning became more and more intense until it spread to the entire platform. Then, the platform exploded. Boom! Without the restriction of the platform, the sword of salvation began to fly downward. In the blink of an eye, the sword of salvation reached Earth and Guinevere's side. Boom! The landing of the sword of salvation stirred up a lot of dust. Guinevere, Lancelot, and Yerek looked at the dust with serious expressions. Gradually, the dust dissipated. A slightly tired young man walked out with the divine blade of salvation in his hand. Chapter 227. Rather than calling him a young man, it would be better to call him a severely exhausted youth. In the end, I still came to the surface. The last king spoke with a weary tone. Master! My lord! Guinevere knelt on one knee, and Lancelot also dismounted and knelt on the ground, lowering his head. Both of them were quite excited. Finally, the long-cherished wish they had been pursuing for thousands of years finally came true. The last king glanced at Guinevere and Lancelot. It turned out to be you. However, there was a hint of weariness in his eyes, but he instantly recovered his tiredness. Then, the last king said to himself, "Since I have come to the ground, I have to kill the Godslayers as soon as possible. Otherwise, the end will come." Then, the last king looked at the Black Prince Yerek with his tired eyes. In an instant, his tired eyes became extremely sharp. The last king raised the sword of salvation and slashed it gently, and a huge and fast lightning slashed toward Yerek. Not good! Yerek was shocked and hurriedly activated his lightning spark. That was the authority Yerek often used, and it could be said to be his representative authority. This authority came from the fallen angel Ramir, who controlled lightning and illusions. It allowed Yerek to enter the world of speed that no one could reach. It was a high-speed movement technique entwined with lightning, which allowed Yerek to obtain the agility of a cat. Whoosh! The lightning released by the last king struck Yerek, who had transformed into lightning. Yerek used the lightning to flee into the distance. However, for some reason, the last king didn't chase after Yerek. "Let's go." After saying that, the last king stepped away, walked past Guinevere and Lancelot, and left. Guinevere and Lancelot waited for the last king to pass before standing up and following him. Not long after the three of them left, the ground nearby began to change. The surrounding flowers and trees began to wither rapidly, and the ground began to dry up as if it lost its life. In the distance, lightning fell on the ground and turned into a figure. Cough! Cough! Yerek half knelt on the ground with one hand covering his chest and the other covering the corner of his mouth. Blood flowed from his hand. The last king, huh? What a terrifying fellow! That's right, the last king had injured Yerek, who had entered the seraphic speed state, with just a casual strike. Although Yerek, who had entered seraphic speed, would lose his physical defense as a godslayer, the last king was able to injure Yerek with a casual blow. This was enough to show how extraordinary the last king was. Also, that blow just grazed me. It's unbelievable. If it had hit me directly, I might have been dead, Yerek analyzed calmly. Then, it turned into a bolt of lightning and left Wuming's villa. Wuming and Athena, who were sleeping soundly, immediately woke up. Do you feel it? The aura of steel. Athena sat up and looked at Wuming. It seems that the last king has descended. No, it should be that Guinevere has successfully awakened him, Wuming said with certainty. Is this your plan as well? Athena asked. Of course not. This is Guinevere's backup plan. Wuming got off the bed and walked to the window. He looked at the unnatural situation outside and continued. The last king will unlock his seal when the number of demon kings on the ground increases. Until now, the seal of the last king has begun to move. But because I am not a pure godslayer, the last king has not completely awakened yet. Athena followed and looked outside with Wuming. Originally, I wanted to use the draconic snake attribute to stimulate the last king to appear, so I sent my subordinates to capture the draconic snake. But because there were already draconic snakes, so you fought with me, right? Athena's snake eyes looked at Wuming. As expected of the goddess of wisdom. You understand immediately. Wuming smiled awkwardly. After all, Wuming was using Athena. I don't blame you. I admire the fact that you can use wisdom to achieve your goal. Athena smiled slyly after seeing Wuming's embarrassment. Wuming heaved a sigh of relief. So Athena was just teasing him. Shaking his head, Wuming left the window and walked to the door. Now that the last king has appeared, the chaos outside must be caused by the last king. After all, I am the mastermind, so I have to take the responsibility of defeating him. Wuming was right. The last king was also a god of disobedience. As a god of disobedience, he must have the ability to cause catastrophic changes to his surroundings. As mentioned before, if the god of war descended, the war would occur unnaturally. If the god of sea descended, the sea level would rise unnaturally. If the god of sun descended, the sun would become extraordinarily hot. As for what the last king would cause, Wuming didn't know. But Wuming believed that the disaster caused by the last king would not be weaker than the other gods of disobedience. Wuming believed that the disaster caused by the last king would be 100 times stronger than the other gods of disobedience. Stay here and rest. I have placed the Gorgon stone on the table. Remember not to run around. Gotcha. As the door closed, Athena was the only one left in the room. Athena silently walked to the table where the Gorgon stone was placed. Then, the corners of her mouth curled up. Wuming walked out of the room and came to the hall. He saw the fully armed girls, including Alice, who was mentally exhausted from using spirit vision. After Wuming arrived, all the girls' eyes were focused on Wuming. Did everyone realize? Wuming asked. The girls nodded in agreement. It's the last king, right? Alice said. Wuming nodded. Most likely. Then Alice spoke. Just now, the Sage Council of Greenwich sent me a message. Just now, almost all the magic associations in the world sent a message to the Sage Council of Greenwich. The spirit veins under their jurisdiction have been disrupted to varying degrees. Mr. Gonzai just called me and said that the spirit veins in Japan have been completely disrupted, so he needs to ask Yuri and Huina for help, Erica said. Master Wuming, I have to hurry back to the United Kingdom. I need to go back and hold a ceremony to stabilize the spirit veins, Alice said. Then I'll ask Erica to send you off, Wuming said. No need, Master Wuming. I'm afraid Erica and Miss Liliana have to rush back to Italy too, Alice said with a smile. Wuming looked at Erica and Liliana. Because the two of us are rare prodigies in the Italian Magic Association, my uncle asked me to go back to Italy to stabilize the spirit veins. Grandpa told me the same. He also said that the king would definitely allow it. Liliana blushed. After all, as a knight, she could only stay in the rear and let her master go to the battlefield alone in the face of a great enemy. Liliana couldn't help but feel a little guilty. It's okay. You can go back too. However, I'll give you some protection first. Alice blushed when she heard Wuming's words. It's a normal protection. Wuming glanced at Alice and said with a smile. Then, Wuming touched the girls' foreheads to give them the protection of super magic power. In this way you can squander it however you want, Wuming said. Then, the girls left the villa. Then, a guest came to the villa. Chapter 228. In the hall, Wuming sat casually on the sofa and quietly waited for the guest in front of him to speak. The guest seemed to want Wuming to speak first, so he didn't speak. Wuming yawned casually and continued to be silent. As if admitting defeat, the guest spoke. The disobedient king, you know about the arrival of the last king, right? Yarek couldn't bear the silence and spoke first. Since the other party had spoken, Wuming didn't hide it. I know, or rather, I planned the arrival of the last king. In an instant, Yarek's look at Wuming changed. From a guy he could barely work with to a complete enemy. Wuming saw the look in Yarek's eyes, or rather, from the beginning, Wuming saw that Yarek was rejecting him, so Wuming mocked Yarek. In any case, the final king will definitely descend. I merely brought forward the time of his descent. Listening to Wuming's nonchalant speech, Yarek frowned. Do you know how severe the disaster caused by the last king is? You dare to summon the last king to the ground ahead of time. Although Yarek wasn't a good person, he couldn't watch the world suffer, and this was also due to Yarek's good upbringing. Of course I know, and the reason I let him descend is to defeat the last king, to defeat him completely. Wuming meant that he wanted to completely eliminate the last king to prevent him from coming again in the future. After all, Yarek had read in the records that the last king came more than once, and every time he came, he would disappear after killing all the demon kings, and the disaster on the earth would stop. Wuming's idea was correct, but, do you really have the ability to completely eliminate the last king, Villotharanst? Yarek called out Wuming's disobedient name. Don't think that you can kill the last king just because you're a god. Wuming scoffed at Yarek's mockery. You came to find me after meeting the last king, right? Wuming asked. Wuming had received news from Guinevere that the Black Prince Yarek had witnessed the resurrection of the last king and had escaped after being injured by the last king. Yarek was defeated by the last king, so he came back to Wuming. This was Wuming's guess. So what? Yarek frowned. Then let me give you a word of advice. Don't judge others based on your own standard. What he meant was, you are weak, but don't think of others as weak. I carried out this series of plans in order to defeat the last king. Since the other side was so confident, Yarek didn't say anything else. Then, resisting the urge to leave, Yarek spoke again. Since that's the case, you must know about the Ancient Covenant. The Ancient Covenant was the special authority that only a small number of steel had, as Sun Wukong, the great sage equal to heaven, had said. Wuming nodded. The last king must have the authority of the Ancient Covenant. I thought of a way to weaken his power. When Yarek said this, Wuming also thought of something. That was, since the Ancient Covenant is the power to multiply the number of Godslayers, then, if there is only one Godslayer left, then the Ancient Covenant will be useless. Engage in civil war to reduce the number of Godslayers. This was the idea that Yarek and Wuming came up with. Since you are so confident in yourself, do you want to try this method? Yarek looked at Wuming cautiously. In response, Wuming smiled. I have to say, this method is indeed very effective. However, I don't think the last king's strength lies in the Ancient Covenant. The last king had the Ancient Covenant to increase his power, but Wu Ming didn't believe that Sun Wukong, who wasn't the last king, would have the Ancient Covenant. The last king was called the last king because he had the power to resist the last king. So, I reject your suggestion. Wuming looked into Yarek's eyes and said firmly. You can try to communicate with the other Godslayers and engage in civil war among the demon kings. I accept that you can attack me at any time, but, Wuming sat up straight and looked at Yarek. Do it as soon as possible. Otherwise, the last king will be defeated by me. Then, Wuming leaned on the sofa and closed his eyes. Yarek narrowed his eyes, thinking about something. Then, he turned into a lightning bolt and left Wuming's mansion. Wuming, who was sitting on the sofa with his eyes closed, said without turning his head. Sebastian. Yes. The old man named Sebastian appeared behind Wuming. Did Satya successfully escape from John's pursuit? Wu-Ming asked. Yes, Wu-Ming-sama. With my help, Satya has escaped from the pursuit of the American godslayer John Pluto Smith, and came to Japan. At this moment, Satya is guarding Angela in the cave behind the mansion. After listening to Sebastian's words, Wu-Ming felt a little helpless. In fact, Wu-Ming asked Satya to capture Angela a long time ago. After all, the only snake that had nothing to do with him was the American god, Angela. Wu-Ming's original intention was to use Angela as a primer to stimulate the appearance of the last king, but he didn't expect that America's godslayer, John Pluto Smith, would be so difficult to deal with that Zaisha couldn't safely bring Angela to Japan. In the end, Wu-Ming chose to use himself and Athena as a catalyst. Although the effect wasn't good, the final result was good, and the last king was revived. Now, Angela was useless, and Wu-Ming wasn't someone who would kill easily, but he couldn't just let Angela go. After all, that guy had done a lot of bad things. Keep him as a pet. Incidentally, Angela's true form was a 50-meter-long demonic snake, Leviathan the snake god. Let Satya bring Angela here, we don't need to watch her for the time being. Yes, I'll contact Satya. Sebastian stepped aside and began to contact Satya. After about a few seconds, a black and red portal appeared in front of Wu-Ming. Zaisha walked out gracefully with a submissive little loli following behind her. If he was not mistaken, this should be Angela. Long time no see, Lord Wu-Ming. I've missed you. Satya was infatuated with him as soon as she arrived. However, Wu-Ming didn't pay attention to Satya but to the lowly Angela behind her. The reason why Wu-Ming paid attention to Angela was because she was naked. That's right, there were only a few bandages wrapped around her petite body, which was even more seductive than being completely naked. Ahem, why don't you find her some clothes, Satya? Wu-Ming turned his head slightly and asked. This has nothing to do with me, Lord Wu-Ming. She was the one who insisted on not wearing clothes. I don't want Lord Wu-Ming's noble eyes to look at other women's bodies. Satya bit a handkerchief that she took out from somewhere with an unwilling expression. After all, Wu-Ming had told her not to hurt Angela, so Satya couldn't do anything to her and could only threaten her verbally. Then, Wu-Ming took out a white robe from the golden ripples and threw it to Angela. Put it on. To Satya's surprise, Angela was actually obedient and obediently put on the white robe. After all, Angela was particularly stubborn when it came to wearing clothes. Even if Angela was afraid of Satya, she wouldn't give in on wearing clothes. At this time, as if she saw Satya's doubts, Angela spoke. Because Sama is both steel and snake. Chapter 229. Angela stared at Wu-Ming without blinking. Listening to Angela's words, Wu-Ming couldn't help but remember the definition of steel and snake. Steel was born from serpents, and serpents were closely related to the earth. Whether it was the great sage equal to heaven, Sun Wukong, Perseus or Neza, they were all related to the earth or the mother goddess of the earth. Sun Wukong was born from the earth and was a stubborn rock. Perseus was entrusted by Athena to kill Medusa. After receiving a series of help from Athena, Perseus successfully became a hero and married the princess. Although Neza was born with mortal flesh, he later cut his bones to return to his father and flesh to his mother. After his death, his master used the lotus root to reshape his physical body. Be it growing with the land or reshaping, forging, it was a trait of the god of steel. Although the god of steel was the archenemy of Dragonsnake, the god of steel was also the guardian of Dragonsnake, not to mention Wu-Ming, who was both the god of steel and Dragonsnake. Steel and serpent were of the same origin. Wu-Ming, who had dual attributes, was the true guardian of dragon and serpent. Since that's the case, why don't you stay by my side? Wu-Ming asked rather cordially. But no matter how he looked at it, he looked like a kidnapper. Okay. Angela nodded her little head. Ah. That detestable little bastard actually managed to obtain the favor of Lord Wuming. Ah, I'm so jealous. Ah, Xiaotaya bit her handkerchief hard as she screamed in her heart. Although Wuming didn't have the ability to read minds, he could still guess some things based on Xiaotaya's behavior. Wuming coughed and began to issue orders. Ahem. Satya, you've done well this time. You've successfully brought Angela to me in one piece. Don't mention it. This is what I should do. Seeing that Wuming's expression had turned serious, Satya also regained her composure and answered Wuming. Very good. I now have a new mission for you and Sebastian. Yes, Lord Wuming. Please give me your orders. When Sebastian heard Wuming calling for him, he knelt on one knee with Satya and waited for Wuming's orders. The arrival of the last king may be accompanied by the arrival of other gods. When the time comes, act according to the circumstances. Yes, Lord Wuming. Zaisha and Seabass received the order. It was not because Wuming was afraid or anything else. After all, the last king was not weak. Even if Wuming was very confident that he could defeat the last king, it was actually because he was confident in himself. After all, Wuming hadn't seen the last king's strength yet. Wuming wasn't 100% sure that he could defeat the last king, but he still had to maintain his confidence. Then, Angela, you can stay here for now. Remember, don't run around and stay here obediently. Your senior, Snake, is still in this house, so you have to get along well with her. As for the bandaged man, Wuming guessed that it was very likely that he was summoned by the last king. In fact, Wuming's guess was right. The bandaged man was here to help the last king. Guinevere looked at Wuming worriedly, but Wuming could see that Guinevere was a little uneasy about him. Lancelot was still in full armor and his appearance could not be seen. My compatriot, it seems that you are not a god of this world. The last king spoke. As expected of the last king, he could tell at a glance that Wuming was not a native of this world. However, you are indeed Villothoranced. Just as Wuming was about to say something, the last king spoke again. Wuming keenly noticed that the trace of uneasiness in Guinevere's eyes had disappeared. In an instant, Wuming seemed to understand. Then, my compatriot, my old enemy, let us quickly begin the slaughter. I can't stay on the ground for too long. You know yourself well, Wuming said. Chapter 230. Wuming knew what the last king meant by, I can't stay on the ground for too long. The last king also knew that as long as he stayed on the ground, he would cause global destruction to the earth. It could be seen from the chaos of spiritual veins all over the world that the last king brought about a global disaster. Of course, I tried very hard to avoid coming to the ground. When the last king said that sentence, Wuming seemed to think of something. Is that why the dragon snake attribute can't wake you up from the myth? Wuming said to himself. Wuming now understood why a series of methods couldn't summon the last king to the ground. That was because the last king was avoiding appearing, or rather, he was avoiding appearing. When there were 6 gods' layers and 1 demigod on the ground, the last king had already awakened, but he didn't reach the upper limit of the last king's awakening, so the last king endured and didn't appear in the myth. When Wuming and Athena fought, although their dragon snake attribute also stimulated the last king, it was still a little short of the upper limit, so the last king didn't appear in the world. When Guinevere found the place where the last king slept, Guinevere chose the simplest, most violent and most effective way, which was to summon the last king directly to the ground. That was what the last king couldn't resist, so the last king showed up, showing an extremely tired face. As you can see, King of Disobedience, as long as I stay in this world for a moment longer, the world will be destroyed because of me. Steel was born from the earth, so naturally, it could absorb the power of the earth. The great sage, Sun Wukong, could find spiritual veins to restore his power when his power was incomplete, so there was no reason why the last king couldn't. You must know about the ancient covenant, right? The last king suddenly asked. In fact, the ancient covenant was created for me, and what I hold is the most orthodox ancient covenant. Could it be? Wu Ming thought of a possibility. Yes, as long as there are multiple godslayers on the ground, my power will increase. As if to verify the last king's words, the magical power in the last king's body began to rise sharply. It instantly surpassed the total amount of magic power of Guinevere, Lancelot, and the bandaged man. Even Wu Ming, who had almost unlimited mana, was shocked. Now, Wu Ming had to admit that the last king was probably the strongest enemy he had ever faced. Then, the last king raised the platinum blade in his hand. If you and the others had killed all the other godslayers before coming here, you might still have a chance of winning. Unfortunately, the platinum blade began to gather energy, and a small platinum ball began to gather at the tip of the platinum blade. You've already lost. In an instant, the platinum energy ball shot towards Wu Ming. Boom! A violent explosion occurred where Wu Ming and the others were standing. Dust covered everything. Guinevere looked on worriedly, but because of their different standpoints, Guinevere and Wu Ming were now enemies, so Guinevere didn't do anything. A breeze blew, and the smoke was blown away, revealing Wu Ming and the others. Wu Ming stretched out his hand, and a shield-like armor with 7 purple petals appeared in front of him. Obviously, it was the armor that blocked the last king's attack. 7 blazing rings, Roajax. Wu Ming slowly said the name of the noble phantasm. That was the pseudo-noble phantasm that Wu Ming created with Create Green item. This was the noble phantasm that Wu Ming had learned from Wei Gong Shiro after his heroic spirit transformation. During the Trojan War, the bronze shield that was wrapped in 7 layers of cowhide was used to block the javelin of the hero Hector. Just like the rule breaker, it was a noble relic that was obtained after the sublimation of the anecdote. It was said that each petal was comparable to an ancient city wall. Crack! The Roajax in front of Wu Ming shattered. After all, it was only a replica and the last king's attack wasn't that easy to defend against. Naturally, the Roajax broke as well. Noble phantasm? The last king frowned. I'm sorry, but the last king may have to disappoint you. While speaking, Wu Ming took out X-Silver from the golden ripple. Then, Wu Ming raised his right hand holding X-Silver and used Create Green item again. Golden particles gathered on Wu Ming's sword, changing the shape of X-Silver, and the original silver-white sword became golden. Unfortunately, I think I have a good chance of winning. What's that? Guinevere, Lancelot and the rest were shocked when they saw the sacred sword in Wu Ming's hand. That was because the sacred sword in Wu Ming's hand was too similar to the last king's divine sword of salvation. Countless rays of light began to gather on the sacred sword in Wu Ming's hand. Then, Wu Ming used the true name of the noble phantasm with both hands. Excalibur, Excalibur! Wu Ming swung his sword down heavily. Oh no! Lancelot immediately carried Guinevere and rode away on his white horse. Bandage Man also jumped lightly, and the wind carried him away. The last king did not move, and he looked at the golden torrent tiredly. The golden magical torrent rushed towards the last king, and the light and heat continued to attack him. In this world, Wu Ming, who had the identity of King Arthur, had the right to use the Excalibur. Silent Cry successfully used the Create Great item and X-Silver to create the Excalibur Excalibur. A moment later, Wu Ming stopped using the noble phantasm and swung the sword. Wu Ming looked at the ground in front of him that looked like it had suffered a natural disaster. Lancelot, who had escaped earlier, carried Guinevere and stood aside. Bandage Man was floating in the sky with the wind, and the few of them looked at the scene caused by Wu Ming's attack. The land had been plowed once again, but a shield had appeared where the last king had been standing. The last king was holding an ancient shield, blocking Wu Ming's noble phantasm. Even the ground behind the last king was defended by the last king, which created a strange phenomenon. On the dilapidated ground, with the last king as the starting point, the ground behind him was still intact. After all, the last king had stayed there for a long time, and it had caused the ground to deteriorate. It looked intact on the surface, but there was no vitality inside. Wu-Ming had seen the shield that blocked the attack of the Excalibur not long ago. Aegis Shield, Wu-Ming said the shield's real name. Yes, it was the same shield that Athena used during the battle between Wu-Ming and Athena. Upon closer inspection, the shield looked exactly the same as Athena's shield, except for the lack of Medusa's head. Therefore, this shield should be called the Aegis. You are indeed the legendary King Arthur of Britain. You are right, this shield is Aegis. The last king's voice came from behind the shield. Chapter 231. The last king revealed himself and looked at Wu-Ming. Then, a grid similar to the Manchala formation appeared behind the last king. The last king placed Aegis on one of the grids. However, the moment Aegis touched the Manchala formation, the shield turned into nothingness. Then, the Manchala formation disappeared. This shield is really Aegis, the last king said again. But I'm a little confused. Why can you use Aegis? Wu-Ming began to suspect the last king's identity, and guessed his real name. After all, not everyone could use Aegis. I'm sorry, but I have no comment, the last king said quietly. Let's end this quickly. With that, the last king charged at Wu-Ming with his divine sword. Wu-Ming was not to be outdone either. He charged at the last king with his divine sword. The two began the most primitive hand-to-hand combat. Bandage Man, who was floating in the sky, saw the last king and Wu-Ming fighting. He wanted to go up and help the last king, but, boom! A blazing flame rushed at Bandage Man with a sound that broke through the sound barrier. Bandage Man hurriedly used the wind to block it. I can't let you disturb Lord Wu-Ming. Satya was fully armed and wore a magenta full-body armor. She held a pike in her right hand and maintained the traces of a magic formation in her left hand. She smiled at Bandage Man. Then, I'll kill you first. With that, Bandage Man charged at Satya. Ha 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 ha. Then come and try. Let's see if you can kill me, Nasrik's strongest one-on-one combat power. With that, Satya charged at Bandage Man as well. On the other side, Guinevere and Lancelot. Lancelot put Guinevere down as he spoke. Although I've already made a contract with my lord, now is not the time for the contract to be established. I still have an obligation to help my lord. Then, Lancelot looked at the confused Guinevere. You've been demoted to godly ancestor. Don't get involved in battles that you can't participate in. In fact, Lancelot didn't want Guinevere to be entangled with the last king and Wu-Ming, which was why he told Guinevere to stay here. After all, even though Guinevere had been demoted to a godly ancestor, he was still very powerful. After all, the godly ancestor of the United States, Angela, was able to fight with the American godly slayer, John Pluto Smith, and was defeated by John in the end. However, Angela had proven the power of a godly ancestor. Then, Lancelot galloped over on his horse. Uncle. Guinevere looked at Lancelot's departing figure and began to recall. In fact, before Wu-Ming arrived, Guinevere and Lancelot had already noticed that the last king was exhausted from the battle. Therefore, they took the opportunity to inform the last king of their thoughts. Guinevere recalled his conversation with the last king. I see. Do you too want to enter King Arthur's myth? The last king said. Guinevere and Lancelot were a little uneasy at the moment. After all, in the eyes of some strict monarchs, this was considered betrayal. Actually, you don't have to ask me. The last king seemed to see their concerns and comforted them. We are not monarchs and subjects, we are just partners walking on the same path. That's right, although Guinevere and Lancelot kept calling each other master and my lord, the three of them were just partners. Moreover, you are indeed Guinevere and Lancelot now. It's normal for you to want to return to the monarch you truly serve," the last king said calmly. "However, this agreement still needs to be fulfilled," the last king said again. "If I kill him, then you will have no one to serve. Look forward to him killing me, Guinevere, Lancelot." After that, the last king didn't say anything. The timeline turned to the present. Guinevere returned to his senses and looked at Lancelot, who was about to go to support Lancelot. "Uncle, you are right. No matter what happens in the future, I am still his lordship's maidservant. I will fight for his lordship." What was loyalty? Guinevere finally chose loyalty between loyalty and love. He wanted to be loyal to the very end. "I can't let you disturb his battle, God's ancestor." Guinevere turned his head and looked at the source of the voice. A girl wearing a Greek off-shoulder dress and a garland on her head came over. "You are Lord Athena." Yes, that girl was the ancient mother goddess Athena, who once again restored her Trinity true body. Because Wooming left the Gorgon stone on the table and specifically told Athena, Athena took advantage of Wooming's absence and quietly followed him. In fact, Wooming left the Gorgon stone so that Athena could protect herself. After all, Athena had just been severely injured by Wooming. "Are you going to stop me, Lord Athena?" Guinevere looked at the approaching Athena and asked. "Can't help it. I am already his subordinate god. If my master god is in trouble, of course I will help him." Athena's serpentine eyes flashed. "Didn't you just lose to Lord Villo? You must be very weak now." Guinevere asked. "You don't have to worry about that." Athena licked her lips and smiled seductively. "I am confident that I can stall you, who has been demoted from Earth Mother to God's ancestor." "Is that so?" Guinevere took a deep breath. "Then you are Guinevere's enemy." The battle was about to begin. When Lancelot rode his white horse toward the last king and Wooming, he suddenly stopped. An old man came straight in front of him. "Snake?" Lancelot felt the urge to kill the enemy as a steel blade. "Nice to meet you, you are Lancelot, right? My name is Sebastian Dean, Wooming, Sama's subordinate. I'm sorry to say that you can't pass through here." Sebastian bowed and said politely, "Then you shall be my opponent, Snake." Silent Cry and the last king fought back and forth, sword chi flying and mana radiating in all directions, constantly destroying the land that had already been destroyed once. As expected of King Arthur's strongest knight, Villotharanst, a man with great martial arts skills. Wooming also praised. "It's the same for you. I can feel that your martial arts skills have been honed through experience." However, there was one thing that Wooming didn't say, that was, Wooming felt a kind of king's spirit. Chapter 232. Wooming was chatting with the last king, trying to find the last king's weakness through the conversation. "Indeed, I've gone through hardships that ordinary people can't go through. In reality, it's my own choice." "Your own choice?" Wooming analyzed secretly. "So, disobedient king, do you know why I'm called the last king and why I'm called the hero?" Wooming narrowed his eyes when he heard what the last king said. That was the question that Wooming was thinking about earlier. Indeed, the last king was the existence that killed all the demon kings on the ground. In that case, the last king must be extremely powerful. However, that was unrealistic. Wooming did not believe that the last king could kill all the godslayers that had died since ancient times by relying on his martial arts alone. If that were the case, the last king would not be a threat at all. Wooming would have killed him long ago. After all, the last king must be a disobedient god. There was no god that was invincible in mythology. Even those who were close to being invincible had a fatal weakness. That was fixed. Wooming speculated that the last king had a special item or skill. The ancient covenant was a special skill. As long as there were godslayers on the ground, the ancient covenant would work. It would give the hero, the last king, the number of Godslayers, a multiplier. However, merely increasing the last king's ability did not mean that he would be able to kill any Godslayers. Wuming had a bold guess based on the fact that the last king had used the Aegis that not everyone could use and the Manchala formation that appeared behind the last king when he stored the Aegis. You have all the god relics that the gods have given you. Wuming looked at the last king firmly and answered the last king's question. The last king smiled in response to Wuming's guess. You're right. With that, the Manchala phalanx once again appeared behind the last king. Immediately after, every grid in the Manchala square formation shone with a golden light. Under the golden glow, Wuming could clearly see all sorts of god relics of all shapes and sizes being stored in the Manchala formation. Wuming could not help but narrow his eyes. The gods created the position of the last king. In order for the last king to kill any of the Godslayers, the gods gave their god relics to the last king. The god relics in the Manchala formation began to glow one after another as if they were following the last king's words. And because of that, I became an existence that could kill any Godslayer, the last king said emotionlessly. After all, the authority that the Godslayers seized came from the gods, and the gods all had their own weaknesses. These weaknesses were exploited by the Godslayers, causing the Godslayers to kill the gods and turn their human bodies into Godslayers. Flowers and plants withered, trees died, cracks appeared in the earth, oceans evaporated, and volcanoes began to stir. This was all because the last king had absorbed the essence of the earth. However, the most important thing was the Holy Grail created by Guinevere. The Holy Grail was an existence that provided the last king with abundant mana when he descended. In the past, he was revived with full health. Now, he was revived with full health and mana. The two symbolized different things. In addition, because he was absorbing the essence of the earth, his vitality and mana were constantly recovering, making him stronger all the time. This was the reason why the last king was so confident. Moreover, the god of disobedience is only a projection of God on the earth. Even if I die once, I can continue to be a projection the next time. That's unfortunate, the last king. Wuming looked at the last king with a smile and continued. I came to this world in my true form. The last king narrowed his eyes. What Wuming meant was obvious. As long as he killed Wuming, he would not be revived. Well then, let me experience the power of the god relics that the gods have given me. Chapter 233. Wuming put down the holy sword as soon as he was done speaking. The holy sword was engulfed by the golden ripple. Subsequently, Wuming placed his hand in the golden ripple. Subsequently, the last king put down the savior sword as if he was responding to Wuming. A glow appeared in the Manchala formation behind him. Subsequently, countless god relics shot towards Wuming like bullets. Wuming analyzed the magic contained in the god relic. The last king was using the power of the god relics to cause explosive damage to the enemy. Wuming could not help but smile as he watched the familiar scene. My disciple has used this technique before. As her master, it's completely useless to me. Seeing that countless god relics were about to shoot towards Wuming, a series of golden ripples appeared behind Wuming. Walla walla! Countless golden chains whizzed out of the golden ripples with clanking sounds. The Enkidu had a special effect on divinity. Given that the Enkidu had evolved, it could fight the god relics of the gods and Buddhas in the sky. It could even suppress them slightly. Bang! 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 Countless god relics collided with the golden chains, causing a series of large-scale explosions. Boom! 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 The dust created by the intense explosions drowned each other. Wuming waved his hand and a magical wind blew the dust away, revealing the last king who was frowning. What do you think, last king? Do you still want to try? Wuming smirked slowly as he looked at the last king. The last king did not say anything. Instead, he used his actions to prove himself. Since the god relics did not work on Lin Huang, he would use the god relics to fight Lin Huang. That was what the last king thought. A glow appeared in one of the Manchala formation behind the last king. Subsequently, a golden longbow appeared in the last king's hand. The last king drew the bow and 9 illusory flame arrows appeared on the golden longbow. Ho-e bow! As the last king shouted the god relic's real name, the 9 arrows that could shoot down the sun were shot towards Wuming. Wuming did not panic. He extended his hand and a gigantic ancient stone bow appeared in Wuming's hand. Wuming pulled the stone bow into a full moon and shouted the relic's real name. 9 lives, kill 100 monsters. Wu Ming, who had analyzed the Berserker's Hercules class card, would naturally use Hercules' noble phantasm to kill hundreds of heroic spirit. After all the information of the heroic spirits were stored in the class card. Meanwhile, Wuming used the create green item to bring the relic back to the world. Although Hercules was a berserker, the kill 100 spirits was a bow relic. However, with the help of the great hero Hercules' skill, it was transformed into a cold weapon relic. With Wuming's skill, it was naturally possible for him to transform it. Moreover, by using the bow to kill hundreds of 9 lives, the damage of the noble relic had increased by quite a bit. As the pseudo-relic's real name was released, the 9 demigod arrows that killed the giant venomous snake Hydra collided with the 9 sunset arrows that were shot out from the Ho-e bow. Boom! The 9 flame arrows collided with the 9 divine arrows, creating an intense explosion. Subsequently, the giant bow in Wuming's hand shattered. The last king frowned and put the Ho-e bow away. He then took out another god relic from the Manchala formation. It was a javelin that shone like a meteor. Gumnir! The last king shouted the javelin's name. The javelin was like a meteor, piercing through the atmosphere and shooting toward Wuming. Immediately, the create green item light appeared in Wuming's palm. Wuming condensed the relic, and a scarlet spear appeared in Wuming's hand. Gibalg! The scarlet devil spear shot out explosively. The God King's spear that would definitely hit the enemy and the demonic spear that would definitely hit the enemy's heart collided. The 2 weapons collided, creating sparks, and then returned to the hands of the last king and Wuming. Gibalg shattered when it returned to Wuming's hand, and the Gumnir was firmly grasped by the last king. You always make the first move. This time, it's my turn. With that said, Wuming put his palms together and activated Create Green Item. A large amount of magical power burst out of Wuming's body. The last king looked at Wuming vigilantly. The magical power that Wuming exuded was comparable to the magical power of a god slayer. Then, a long red rod with a golden gauntlet appeared in Wuming's hand. That's Enuma Elish? The last king revealed the true name of this weapon, because the last king's Manchala phalanx also had this weapon. Although the Enuma Elish that Wuming took out was different from the Enuma Elish in the last king's memory, there was no doubt that it was the world sword that recreated the scene of hell before the world was created. Enuma Elish. If that's the case, I'll take it out as well. The Manchala formation behind the last king shone brightly as he spoke. A weapon similar to Enuma Elish with a golden gauntlet and a red rod appeared in the last king's hand. It happened to verify Wuming's speculation. Since the Savior Divine Sword was so similar to the Excalibur, perhaps all the relics in the Shinua world had the same appearance and ability as all the god relics in this world. However, I don't believe that you can fully unleash the power of these god relics, the last king. That was right. Even the gods had their own selfish motives. Although the gods and Buddhas had given their god relics to the last king, including the Enuma Elish level god relics, there must be a limit to these god relics. Have you noticed? The last king secretly frowned. In reality, Wuming was right. Just like how the god of disobedience's manifestation had a restriction to weaken its power, the last king could not master these god relics at all. He was only in a superficial state. In other words, he was a layman. However, it was the same for Wu Ming. Although Wu Ming could create the god relics that he knew using create green item, Wu Ming was just like the last king. He was a layman and could only use them simply. However, even if a layman was given a gun, he could kill someone. If a layman was given a mobile machine gun array that could be activated with just a button, he would be able to kill almost everyone. That was the reason why the last king said that these god relics were his trump card. If he did not have the ability to resist or dodge the god relics earlier, he would not have been able to withstand the god relics barrage with his body alone. After snapping back to his senses, Wu Ming lifted Enuma Elish and pointed it at the last king, revealing the real name of the god relic. At that moment, the last king shouted the god relic's name. Enuma Elish, Heaven and Earth Distortion, Star of Creation. Enuma Elish. Almost at the same time, two red hurricanes that tore through space collided. Chapter 234. As the red storm collided with each other, the space around them shattered like pieces of glass. Within the void fault created by the space shattering, there was only darkness. In the dark, some dark matter could be seen vaguely. When he saw the dark matter, Wu Ming's inner alarm went off. And it was also because of this warning that Wu Ming realized that he was a little addicted to the battle just now. Although it didn't affect him much, Wu Ming didn't like to be controlled by impulse. This is considered a blessing in disguise. Wu Ming thought to himself. At the same time, Wu Ming and the last king stopped using the Enuma Elish sword. Soon, the broken space recovered bit by bit. The Enuma Elish sword in Wu Ming's hand shattered and disappeared. Although Wu Ming could create an Enuma Elish sword that could not be replicated, the sword could only be used as a one-time missile. If he wanted to use it again, he would have to create a new one. Moreover, the mana required to create an Enuma Elish sword was thousands of times more than the mana required to create other relics. Fortunately, Wu Ming had studied the Enuma Elish sword from Gilgamesh when he was in Uruk. He was only able to create it with the help of Kalas. Needless to say, the magic costume that Zelik made for Wu Ming was perfect for Wu Ming. If he could create it a few more times, Wu Ming might not need Kalas's help anymore. However, since Wu Ming had only created it once, he could not replicate it. As the topic changed, Wu Ming recalled the dark matter that he had seen earlier. I can't be wrong. The dark matter is the same as the black mud that Julian used. At this moment, the last king, who had put away the Enuma Elish sword, spoke. It seems like there's something outside this world. You should know about it since you're from another world. Wu Ming frowned and thought about it. Then, he shook his head. I don't really know what it is. I only know that it's dangerous. After all, Wu Ming had no idea what it was that had the same aura as Wu Ming. Looking at Wu Ming's serious face, the last king chose to believe what Wu Ming said. It seems like as long as we don't open the space from the outside world, they won't be able to affect this world. That's true, but who knows if the darkness will find a way to come into this world. After all, Aria's heart had been corroded by the darkness, and he had completely fallen to the dark side. Moreover, you and I have already opened the tunnel earlier. Wu Ming meant that the dark matter might have already come to this world. Is that so? But it's a pity that I don't want to get involved in this mess anymore. The reason why humans can slay gods and become god slayers that are neither human nor god is because humans have unlimited possibilities. The calamities of this era will be left to the people of this era to resist. I will only do one thing, and that is to kill you demon kings that shouldn't exist in this world, then quickly go into hibernation. With that, the last king raised the sword of salvation. Wu-ming also agreed with the last king's words about humans have infinite possibilities, and the disaster of this era should be resisted by the people of this era. Moreover, even if the last king wanted to stay on the ground to protect humans, Wu-ming would not allow it. As long as the last king stood on the ground, it wouldn't take long for the entire Earth to fall into desolation until it became a dead planet. It's strange, the last king. As a disobedient god and the strongest god of steel, you hate fighting so much. Wu-ming looked at the last king with some playfulness. The reason why the disobedient gods were called disobedient gods was that they were mentally abnormal and disobedient to their own myth. This also meant that the disobedient gods were belligerent. Whether it was Welslana, Mekhl, Athena, Perseus, Neza, Susanu, or even Lancelot, who was the shadow of God, these disobedient gods were all belligerent. Including the god-slayers who killed the disobedient gods, Warban, Luo Hao, and Salvator, these three were the kind of people who would fight without saying a word. Although some god-slayers were not keen on fighting, such as Yarek, Madame Aisha, and Hardadef, they still had the desire to fight in their bones. This was the constitution of the god-slayers that could not be changed. As the strongest god of steel among the disobedient gods, they were the most belligerent. It was like the relationship between ordinary people and a fighting race. Just kidding. Back to the topic, as the last king of the strongest god of steel, he was neither mentally abnormal nor belligerent like other gods of steel. In Wu-ming's opinion, the reason why the last king fought was that he wanted to sleep as soon as possible, so that the earth would not completely lose its vitality. The last king did not want to be a hero who killed the god. If there was a chance, the last king would choose to leave his identity as a hero. Wu-ming was not surprised. Because of this, there was no doubt that being the last king was very abnormal. Because he was not keen on fighting, the last king sighed and then explained. That's because of my brother. As if in response to the last king's words, a black shadow appeared behind the last king, and that black shadow simply appeared and then disappeared immediately. My brother helped me shoulder everything. He shouldered all the negative mental effects that a disobedient god should have. That was why my brother could only follow behind me, always in a state of chaos, while I became like the character in the legends. That was one of the reasons why the last king wanted to sleep as soon as possible. He didn't want to see his brother help him bear the chaos anymore. But because of the influence of the earth on the last king since ancient times, the last king became so tired. So that's how it is, the last king. I probably guessed your real name. Wu-ming smiled. Really? So what? Come on, let's fight. The last king was not worried that Wu-ming would use the last king's real name to find his weakness. However, instead of saying that he was not worried, it was better to say that the last king had a glimmer of hope, hoping that Wu-ming could defeat him. That was what Wu-ming saw from the last king's eyes. The eyes were the window of the soul. That sentence was true. So, let's start the second round. Holy light and lightning intertwined as the second round between Wu-ming and the last king began. Chapter 235. Wu-ming and the last king once again began their hand-to-hand combat. The last king's divine sword of salvation was surrounded by lightning. Each of his attacks contained the lightning of salvation. Each of the last king's attacks contained supreme power. Wu-ming blocked the attacks with his sacred sword. Each of the attacks gave Wu-ming immense pressure. In the ancient times, I killed the God-Slayer with my own strength and the ancient agreement. The last king began to tell the story as he fought Wu-ming. However, since my information was exposed, it became harder and harder to kill the God-Slayer, the last king lamented. After that, the gods gave me some of their god relics. The last king kept swinging the divine sword of salvation at Wu-ming, while Wu-ming blocked the attacks with his sacred sword. He continued to listen to the last king's story. Every time I killed a godslayer, the gods would give me their god relics. Just like that, I have almost all of the gods' god relic. The last king swung the divine sword of salvation hard, forcing Wu Ming to retreat. Wu Ming, who was holding his sword with both hands, sank deep into the ground. Deep scratches were left on the ground as he was forced to retreat. The combination of these god relics formed the Manchala formation. It's the divine sword of salvation with supreme power. The last king pointed the divine sword at Wu Ming again as soon as he was done speaking. Zzz, zzz, zzz. The lightning of salvation continued to surge on the divine blade of salvation. Subsequently, the lightning of salvation was shot at Wu Ming like a bullet by the divine sword of salvation. Dong! A thunderous explosion was heard. The lightning of salvation hit Wu Ming accurately. However, the last king frowned. With the support of the ancient agreement, he could clearly sense that Wu Ming was not dead because the power in the last king's body did not diminish. Moreover, the last king did not believe that Wu Ming would be killed so easily. As expected, the glow of the sacred sword was revealed as soon as the dust from the explosion dissipated. The divine sword is indeed powerful. Unfortunately, my sacred sword is not weak either, Wu Ming said. A relic-level mana gathered on the sacred sword that he was holding. The sacred sword shone brightly. The last king looked at Wu Ming cautiously as he thought that Wu Ming was going to activate his relic. A large amount of mana was attached to the sacred sword, forming a layer of mana blade that was 3 meters tall. Subsequently, Wu Ming swung it. Although Wu Ming and the last king were fighting by the sea, the last king was the last king. The sea level began to drop. Putting aside the fact that Alice and the others were trying their best to stabilize the spirit vein, the water source near Wu Ming and the last king was either evaporated by the last king's passive attack or by the mana or skills released during their battle. Therefore, there was no longer a trace of water in the area. The last king waved his divine blade of salvation, and the thunder of salvation flashed, canceling out Wu Ming's huge blade of mana. Fear the one with wings. Evil people and powerful people are all afraid of me with wings. My wings will bring you a curse. Evil people can't hit me. The moment he heard the words, the last king felt that his eyes were dazzled. Wu Ming instantly teleported in front of the last king. Wu Ming raised the 3 meters tall mana blade and swung it at the last king. The last king had dynamic vision and captured Wu Ming's movements. However, being able to capture it didn't mean that he could react. The speed was so fast that it was suffocating. The heat on the mana blade was comparable to the previous Excalibur. There was no doubt that if the last king was hit by this sword, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. The definition of a relic was to inject mana into the relic and shout the relic's true name to release the power contained in the relic. However, Wu Ming was thinking that if the Holy Sword was infused with magic comparable to the Holy Sword's noble phantasm without calling out the noble phantasm's true name, would the power of a Holy Sword without releasing its true name be comparable to the power of a noble phantasm? There was no doubt that Wu Ming's method was successful at the moment. Wu Ming first used mana and added a layer of 3 meters tall mana blade on the Holy Sword to expand the attack range of the Holy Sword. Then, Wu Ming compressed the mana used to release a relic into the mana blade on the outer layer of the Holy Sword. The outer layer of the mana blade was successfully transformed into a normal attack that was comparable to the release of a relic. Swoosh! With the skills and dynamic vision that he had gained from fighting countless god slayers since ancient times, the last king successfully dodged Wu Ming's fatal attack. Boom! The last king dodged, but the price was that the ground suffered another large-scale destruction. The entire coast cracked open like a turtle, and then it shattered. Now, the entire ground level had been lowered, although it was caused by man-made physics. The 3 meters tall mana blade that was attached to the outer layer of the Holy Sword disappeared after cracking the ground. With just one attack, the mana attached to the Holy Sword that was comparable to a relic was instantly consumed. Although this move was quite powerful, The consumption of mana was also visible to the naked eye. Therefore, it was estimated that this move could only be used by Wuming. The relic was the trump card of the servant, the decisive weapon that changed the outcome of the battle. Therefore, the relic could not be used lightly. In the ordinary Holy Grail War, generally speaking, the servant only had one relic, but there were many servants who had multiple relic. For the servants whose magic attribute was D level or below, releasing a relic would almost exhaust the servant's mana. If it was a C-level servant, it would be in a dangerous state. When the relic was released, if it did not achieve the expected effect, or if the opponent did not die, the servant who could not release the relic without mana was basically dead. Of course, there were also servants whose noble phantoms did not consume much mana, but that was a minority, and this kind of servant basically had a fatal weakness, so let's not talk about it for now. Then, Wuming released his own mana and attached it to the holy sword. The last king also captured the entire process, which took less than 0.1 seconds. None of the servants could use their noble phantoms with a gap of 0.1 seconds, and it was unlikely that any servant could use their noble phantoms for more than 10 times in a row. Even if there were multiple relic, it was not necessarily the case. And there is no servant with enough mana to support all of this. Wuming, who was in the state of lightning speed, turned in an instant and slashed at the last king. Clang! The last king, who was prepared, caught Wuming's attack, and then immediately bounced off Wuming. Immediately, the last king raised the Sword of Salvation, and the Sword of Salvation emitted a dazzling light. Light of Salvation, eliminate the filth. In an instant, the lightning speed and mana blade on Wuming disappeared. Chapter 236. So that's how it is. Is this also one of the uses of the Blade of Salvation? Wuming, who exited the seraphic speed state, held the holy sword in his hand and looked at the last king. You're right. The Blade of Salvation has the lightning of salvation that can purify everything in the world. This light of salvation is another use of the lightning of salvation. After sacrificing the attack, although the light of salvation doesn't cause any damage, it can purify a series of negative effects and even eliminate the enemy's power boost. It has an extremely powerful advantage. The last king held the Blade of Salvation with a calm face. Don't say that I'm cheating. King of Disobedience, this is also a use of the Blade of Salvation. In this regard, Wuming shook his head. This is also your power. Of course, I won't say anything, but Wuming has already noticed the weakness of the Light of Salvation. As long as the Light of Salvation doesn't reach, then it can't remove the enemy's power boost. With that, Wuming began to chant a new language. Although that's the case, as long as I cover my body with the Light of Salvation, you won't be able to get close to me. But then, you won't be able to attack, right? Wuming's rebuttal left the last king speechless. It can't be helped. The Light of Salvation is so powerful, but because of this, it must have a limit. If that's the case, then I'll use this. With that, the last king took out a metal disc covered with 2 golden sword-shaped runes. That was the authority of the last king that Guinevere has been holding, the arrowhead disc. The moment the last king finished speaking, the arrowhead disc emitted a light. The golden sword runes flashed and turned into 2 figures that flew out from it. I didn't expect to see you again, King of Disobedience. Last time I was completely defeated. I didn't expect to see you here. Old son, didn't have enough last time. One of them was a handsome golden-haired youth riding a Pegasus. The other was a golden-haired monkey king standing on a golden cloud and wearing golden chainmail. Perseus, son Wukong. Wuming was now completely sure of the arrowhead's ability. Ever since Guinevere had absorbed Perseus, whom Wuming had killed, into the Disk of Light for the first time, Wuming had been wondering if the Disk of Light could revive the dead god of steel for its own use, since it could absorb them. This was the result. The arrowhead's disk is my omnipotent weapon. Don't say that I'm bullying you, the king of disobedience. Then, the last king spoke to Perseus and the great sage, heaven's equal. My compatriot, the proud steel, please lend me a hand. Perseus waved his long robe and got down from the white heavenly horse. He took out the weapon at his waist. There's nothing we can do about it. After all, the comrade before us is very powerful. Sun Wukong scratched his ears and smiled. Since you're willing to give me a chance to kill my enemy, I don't mind helping you. Then, Sun Wukong took out the Jingu Bang from his ear. Wu Ming carefully observed the two resurrected god. He did not believe that the last king's disk of light could revive them completely. Then, Sun Wukong and Perseus rushed toward Wu Ming. Sun Wukong arrived at Wu Ming's side first with lightning speed. The Jingu Bang that weighed 13,500 pounds was aimed at Wu Ming's head. Clank! Wu Ming blocked with his sword. Then, Wu Ming released the blade of magic again. The blade of magic was used by Wu Ming again. Wu Ming sent Sun Wukong flying. Then, a few arrows that seemed ordinary but contained divine power shot toward Wu Ming. Wu Ming dodged and swiftly evaded. However, sizzle! Sizzle! The violent thunder of salvation hit Wu Ming. The last king had predicted the trajectory of Wu Ming, who was in lightning speed. Wu Ming flew backward and fell to the ground. The ground suddenly exploded. The dust caused by the violent impact buried Wu Ming's figure. Since you're looking for death, I won't be polite with you. Wu Ming's voice was filled with anger as it came out from the smoke. Lightning! 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 I'm the conqueror who can defeat thousands with white, tens of thousands with 1,000, and tens of thousands with 10,000. Now, please shine brightly for me who is on the side of justice. Give me divine power. Supreme lightning, increase exponentially. The long and short needles in Wu Ming's heart pointed to the 9 o'clock direction at the same time, activating the double incarnation state that would be unavailable for a while after using it. Countless lightning bolts as thick as buckets rushed out of the dust. One of the lightning bolts instantly arrived in front of the king closest to Wu Ming. That was Sun Wukong. Sun Wukong had already been paralyzed by Wu Ming's lightning aura after using double Thunder God's incarnation. I am the one who crushes all the enemies and enmity between humans and demons. That was the God of Thunder's incarnation's amplification spirit, which could increase his power again. In an instant, countless lightning pillars with a diameter of 3 or 4 meters buried Sun Wukong. Ah! Sun Wukong let out a sorrowful cry. Then, the resurrected Monkey King turned into ashes. At that moment, the stone plate in Wu Ming's heart, which represented the 9 o'clock direction of Thunder God's incarnation, emitted a red light as if a machine overheated. The lightning pillars outside also revealed Wu Ming's figure. Then, Wu Ming looked at Perseus again. It's you. It's you. Perseus was shocked. After all, Wu Ming could easily defeat him before. Now, he had turned the famous great sage, heaven's equal to heaven, into ashes. Perseus was alarmed at this moment. I will deny the sky, deny the earth, the storm will destroy everything, and the shower will cover everything. With the wind that can continue to rise until the point, combined with this supreme divine power, I will make everything in the world bow down to me. In an instant, the two needles that originally pointed to Thunder God's incarnation turned and pointed to the 4 o'clock direction of Thunder God's incarnation. What followed was a torrential downpour of wind. The violent wind blew away everything around Wu Ming, including the ground, the air, and Perseus, who was standing not far away from the last king. The storm rolled up everything on the beach and even the dry coast, soil, rocks, withered grass, rotten trees, and everything was instantly crushed by the violent wind and turned into dust, covering the sky and the earth, falling like a drizzle. This included Perseus, who had a shocked expression on his face just a second ago. At this moment, he also turned into wisps of magic and disappeared. In just a few seconds, Wu Ming killed the two enemies he had killed before. At that time, the last king, who moved because of the wind, opened his eyes, looked at the scene in front of him, and fell into silence. Chapter 237. Wu Ming looked at the silent last king and smiled while wiping a few drops of sweat on his cheeks. Wu Ming, who was in his human form, felt a little tired after using double incarnation twice in a row. The physical burden of double incarnation was not something that anyone could bear. Wu Ming got his noble phantasm through his own noble phantasm. Before the noble phantasm was upgraded, the noble phantasm itself would be set according to Wu Ming's specific situation. As the dragon of origin, Wu Ming was a high-level existence. Although he was still a baby, he was still the dragon of origin. Therefore, Wu Ming's noble phantasm had a great suppressive ability when compared with noble phantasm of the same level. Moreover, those noble phantasms had the ability to evolve infinitely. As a god's authority, Wu Ming's noble phantasm was undoubtedly the most powerful noble phantasm in EX. It could be said to be the EX of EX. However, that also meant that the burden of using noble phantasm was extremely difficult for others. In terms of physical burden alone, if he revealed his true form, Wu Ming was confident that he could penetrate the earth with pure physical strength. Although his physical strength was reduced in his human form, his body was still strong. Let's look at his magical power consumption. Wu Ming, who used double incarnation twice in a row, consumed as much magical power as multiple godslayers. For a magician, obtaining the Holy Grail represented endless magical power. Even if the previous servant obtained the Holy Grail, even if he had been using noble phantasm, he didn't know how long it would take to completely exhaust the Holy Grail's magical power, and that was under the premise that the Holy Grail did not automatically restore its magical power. Take the Holy Grail made by Guinevere as an example. The last king used it as a primer to restore his magical power to its full state. Moreover, because he was standing on the earth, his magical power limit was still constantly breaking through. If it weren't for Wu Ming being the dragon of origin, his magical power was almost infinite, and when Wu Ming incarnated as a servant, his magical power storage was also EX level. If Wu Ming's strongest stat was his magical power, it was undoubtedly his magical power. The level of magical power completely suppressed the sum of strength, agility, durability, and noble phantasm. As for luck, although that could be expressed in data, who could say for sure? All in all, Wu Ming just used 2 double incarnations. At this moment, although his magical power was sufficient, that was the first time Wu Ming felt his magical power was greatly reduced. For Wu Ming, who had never felt a lack of magical power, it was really rare. Well, but it's not a big deal. I guessed it right. You are now weak, last king. Wu Ming grinned happily. Although using the arrowhead disc can summon the dead steel, I have to give them a part of my power, and as my authority to resurrect them, they only have 80% of their power. If they die in battle, you won't be able to get back the power you gave them, right? That's right, that's why the last king didn't use the arrowhead disc. The arrowhead disc summons steel at the cost of his own power. After these steel died, they would directly return to the mythical realm with this power. Therefore, the power of the last king was weakened. And killing these steel can't get the authority because these steel came from the arrowhead disc, the authority of the last king. Killing them only means that the authority of the last king is ineffective. It doesn't matter. Even if my power is weakened, I still have the sword of salvation. Moreover, I am now enough to support the power of the sword of salvation. The last king said indifferently after waving the sword of salvation twice. But you, if I'm not mistaken, you have several authorities that you can't use right now. Wu Ming frowned. Now, in addition to the incarnation representing Thunder God, which was in a red alert state, The stone plate representing Storm and Phoenix were also in a red alert state and temporarily couldn't be used. Previously, Wu Ming wanted to use Double Phoenix Incarnation with Blade of Mana to take down the last king in one fell swoop. However, because he was too close, he couldn't react in time, and the light of salvation from the last king's divine sword of salvation shone on him. Wu Ming's Double Phoenix Incarnation was forced to withdraw and entered red alert. However, Wu Ming now almost figured out the last king's routine, and he summarized several sets of plans in his mind. After thinking for a while, Wu Ming decided to implement one of the plans. Now, you have almost guessed my identity. Don't you want to use your sword of spirit speech? The last king said without sadness or joy. Wu Ming just smiled at that. Although I know your identity, if I use the sword of spirit speech, your light of salvation will become a problem. Manchala Phalanx doesn't work on me, and the lightning of salvation can't hurt me accurately. Now, you can only limit my power with the light of salvation. So, I decided to take the simplest way. Wu Ming rushed to the last king. Thou hast violated the contract and brought sin to the world. On Sunday the sinner shall be punished. Crush his back, dig out his bones, hair and brain, and trample on his blood and mud. If I am the one who cannot get close to the darkness, I will follow the Lord's words and destroy thee. God says human beings are sinful. God says human beings need to be purified. Thus, the torrential flood is bestowed upon me. In the name of the Supreme King, I will grant equal relief. Wu Ming's inner pointers pointed to 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock respectively. Annihilation Avatar and Flood Avatar were activated. The sea, which was almost dried up because of the existence of the last king, suddenly soared. A huge wave of tens of meters high rose from the horizon, rushing toward Wu Ming and the last king at an extremely fast speed. Is this also a power? Looking at the huge wave, Razin said calmly. When the huge wave approached the last king discovered that the color of those huge waves was dark red, the color of blood, the color of death. That was the effect of Annihilation's ability on Flood. The power of Annihilation made the huge wave, which could easily crush steel, more violent. It could be said that if Wu Ming put Sun Wukong in this huge wave, the great sage, Heaven's equal, would definitely turn into dust and disappear. Wu Ming suddenly exerted his strength and jumped to the top of the huge wave. Wu Ming was supported by the huge wave and looked at the last king who was waiting for him. Final king, the hero who annihilates the demon king, come and try to see if you can resist this torrential flood that is mixed with the power to destroy everything. Then, the last king narrowed his eyes. That's enough for the thunder of salvation. With that, the last king's divine blade of salvation exploded with a rumble of thunder, rushing towards the monstrous flood created by Wu Ming to destroy everything. Chapter 238. The divine thunder that contained the power of salvation and the flood that destroyed everything were removed. In an instant, as if the Big Bang occurred, a violent explosion occurred at the intersection of the two. After the explosion, the rising wave summoned by Wu Ming disappeared. However, because of the intersection of the giant wave and the divine thunder, a large amount of white mist rose. The white mist covered the sky and the earth, and soon the sun was blocked. The last king's vision was also blocked. The rising white mist also contained the power of destruction, and the last king could not see through everything around him. So that's your plan. The last king couldn't help but smile. The white mist that contained the power of destruction blocked the last king's vision, and then waited for an opportunity to sneak attack the last king. However, your plan is too clumsy. You've exhausted all your tricks. Just wait for me to kill you, King of Disobedience. With that said, the last king used the light of salvation from the divine sword of salvation and began to purify the surrounding mist. At this moment, a figure dashed out from behind the last king. Excalibur! Wu Ming shouted the true name of the noble phantasm, compressed the noble phantasm that was supposed to be a light cannon into the holy sword, and slashed at the last king with all his might. However, the last king's light of salvation was instantly activated, and the magical power attached to the holy sword disappeared in an instant, leaving only a sharp and sturdy sword. Boom! Poochie! Wu Ming's holy sword was caught by the last king with his bare hands, and a trace of blood was drawn from the last king's palm. Wu Ming's body was pierced by the last king's divine sword of salvation, and a large amount of golden blood spilled from Wu Ming's body. In this way you're a general, the last king said without any sadness or joy. However, Wu Ming smiled. The last king, do you think you've won? Wu Ming looked at the last king with a smile on his face. That's true. After all, regardless of whether you're the god of disobedience or the god slayer, as long as you're not completely killed, you'll definitely retaliate. As he spoke, the divine blade of salvation appeared with streaks of lightning. After all, I'm an existence that won't return until I die. Goodbye, my compatriot. The divine sword of salvation exuded an unprecedented light. There was no doubt that this blow could completely turn Wu Ming into flying ashes. It's time to end it. Wu Ming's voice came from behind the last king. Then, Wu Ming, who had been pierced by the divine blade of salvation, smiled and turned into pure mana before disappearing. This is? The last king was shocked, and he quickly released the divine sword of salvation. But before the last king released the divine sword of salvation, Zabaniya! The last king's heart was affected by Wu Ming's noble phantasm. Although the last king's heart was not destroyed by Wu Ming's noble phantasm, the last king's eyes suddenly widened, and it was obvious that he was affected. At that moment, his movement came to an abrupt halt. Slayer, Flagelak! A light penetrated the last king's heart, and the last king spat out a mouthful of blood. Pft! A black sphere fell to the ground, turned into flying ashes, and disappeared with the wind. Wallalala! Countless chains stretched out from the golden ripples, completely binding the dying last king. That's the slash of the war god's sword, Flagelak, the last king said. Wu Ming, who was wearing a black robe, slowly walked up to the last king. The last king, who had been bound by Enkidu, was no longer a threat. Not only was his magic power sealed, but the effect of restraining gods had also caused the last king to fall into a state of paralysis. He could no longer feel his body. Yes, but I got it from a human. Well, a very interesting human. Is that so? Feeling his life force rapidly draining away, and his unconscious body, the last king gave up on struggling. I didn't expect that you have a doppelganger authority that even I can't see through. That's right, the Wu Ming who was pierced by the last king's divine sword was Wu Ming's dependent avatar. It was just a doppelganger, but that doppelganger had 100% of the original's combat power. To be on the safe side, Wu Ming also used double pointer on that doppelganger, so as not to let the last king see through the doppelganger. And the result was very successful. Wu Ming's black robe shattered and turned into a card, then the card shattered and turned into a little bit of magical power. Wu Ming first used Annihilation and Flood to cover up Wu Ming's dependent avatar. However, the last king used Lightning of Salvation to heat the flood containing destructive power into steam. Wu Ming thought that he might as well make use of it, and then used Create Green Item to create Assassin Hassan Sabah's rank card, successfully hiding his aura. In fact, Wu Ming originally wanted to use Backlight Sword to kill the last king directly. After all, Light of Salvation could only seal skills, which Wu Ming saw from the previous battle. Wu Ming used Light Cannon, but the last king didn't use Light of Salvation. When Wu Ming condensed magical power on Holy Sword, the last king used Light of Salvation, the magical power on Wu Ming's sword disappeared. That just proved the limitations of Light of Salvation. After all, if Light of Salvation could seal everything, such as skills, noble phantoms, and magical power, then the last king didn't need to fight Wu-Ming at all. He could just seal and kill Wu-Ming directly. Did you see the limitations of Light of Salvation? Ahem. Yes, I can't seal or eliminate the released noble phantoms or skills. Only something similar to enhanced status or magical power can be eliminated by Light of Salvation. It was precisely because of this that Wu Ming thought of using the backlight sword that he took from Bazette, yes, took from him. When the last king released Light of Salvation and Lightning of Salvation many times, backlight sword was already triggered. After Wu Ming played with it when he had nothing to do, he studied it when he had nothing to do. Along with his magician avatar, he successfully maintained backlight sword's activation state. Although there was no need to release the backlight sword, Wu Ming still had the attitude of helping Buddha to the west. He used the backlight sword to completely destroy the heart of the last king that had been damaged by Zabaniya. You lost the last king, no Rama. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.